Chapter 45. What is a friend? Mr. 21. Ricknaz, who grew up in the wrench family's workshop, was surrounded by various types of golem workers or half-golem guards. Other than learning various mechanical processing knowledge from his mentors every day, there were very few people who could chat with him. After repairing the language module of the mechanical golem with good intelligence that he picked up by chance, his favorite thing to do was to continue repairing the remaining body of the mechanical golem while chatting with this mechanical golem named 21 on various topics. As long as he could endure the strange words that 21 often said, it was very interesting to communicate with this novel mechanical golem. Even those strange words sometimes seemed to make a lot of sense if one thought about it carefully. Friends are gathering in the mountains and forests together, dividing gold and silver by weight, eating large pieces of meat, drinking wine in a jar. You're talking about bandits and robbers, right? I saw it in the adventures of the Goblin Gondola. But as early as 200 years ago, the last bandit group in the Empire was wiped out. Ricknaz tightened a screw on 21's body. Then, friend, or when a kid with a family hereditary disease in his eyes escapes from the village and goes on the evil path. Another kid tries his best to find him back. I remember that the unique skill that the kid often uses is an attack skill called Whirlwind Shuriken. I think I have heard of Shuriken before. It is a throwing weapon. But what is chakra? The curious goblin otaku scientist was once again led astray by the strange words of a certain mechanical golem. The communication with 21 was always the most interesting for Ricknaz, because the mechanical golem that was used to going astray could always give the genius mechanical designer of the wrench family new inspiration. Whirlwind Shuriken. The goblin's glare bomb had no effect on Ricknaz. He had already pushed down the goggles on his forehead. The strong light was filtered through the brown crystal lens and weakened to the extent that the creature's eyes could accept. In fact, this goblin noble had retreated into the protective circle of the half-golem guards at the beginning of the battle with the Baylor in order to secretly equip the prototype machine, a combat armor that had been created by Ricknaz's exquisite skills after the golem provided many ideas about Gundam and the like. The first prototype was a hybrid engine. It was powered by the latest miniature steam engine developed by the Goblin Empire, as well as 30 enchanted energy storage arrays. The circular, semi-enclosed cockpit was made of a variety of composite materials. Dozens of defensive arrays were assembled with enchanted armor, providing the pilot with all-around protection without any blind spots. As for the weapon system of this mecha, apart from being equipped with Goblin orbital missiles and other weapons, its two mechanical arms, powered by sufficient power, would strike despair into the hearts of any enemy who attempted to engage in melee combat. Ricknaz, who was less than half the size of an adult human, could stand on the same level as the Baylor after putting on the mech. However, the Goblin's technology had yet to fully analyze the concept of the Whirlwind Shuriken. However, Ricknaz, a brilliant mechanical master, had used a new design to make up for this shortcoming. The small enchanted metal umbrella that he had been holding had transformed into a wheel saw full of sharp saw teeth. At this time, it was spinning rapidly in the special groove on the right forearm of the prototype machine. As the goblin's refined gold-stun bullet took effect, the high-speed spinning wheel saw was launched through the steam ejection component, forming the Whirlwind Shuriken that was no less powerful than the wind attribute chakra introduced by number 21. The target was, of course, the Baylor. Ricknaz's alchemy goggles could not only protect against strong light, but also had a mechanical aiming system that assisted shooting. Through the electromagnetic remote control technology at close range, it could also constantly adjust the flying angle of the wheel saw. The physical cheat was terrifying. The strong light that erupted from the blazing Templar's feather extract brought great suppression to the Baylor of the chaotic evil alignment. The great dizziness even made him stop thinking for a moment. What broke his blank state was severe pain, as if he was cut in half. In fact, he was cut in half by Ricknaz's Whirlwind Shuriken. It was just that the cutting power of the wheel saw was too amazing, and the speed of cutting through the demon's waist was too fast. The pain was only captured by his brain after the damage had been done. Advanced, Even if he was seriously injured and cut in half, this powerful demon had not died yet. However, he didn't dare to continue fighting. Anyway, the space lock restriction cast by the chained devil had been broken by him. This Baylor now just wanted to quickly teleport away. His teleportation was interrupted, and a metal fist with thorns imprinted on the Baylor's face. Familiar position, familiar feeling. Number 21 arrived at the battlefield. The heart of the Sawajan Sea priest was stored in a box built with magic and machinery in the body of Golem number 21. This design was not just to control the spellcaster. Its real purpose was to let number 21 extract energy to activate the spell effect that had been imprinted on the enchanted armor. Due to the limitations of the material and the level of the Sawajan spellcaster, only 2 spells could be activated. The Otherworld Gate. The golem, exiled by the Baylor's Labyrinth spell, had returned to the battlefield through the Otherworld Gate using the Sawajan's heart as a beacon. The other spell effect was Raising Gan. Turbulent magic energy spurted out from the golem's palm. The pure magic energy, with explosive and cutting attributes, had a close contact with the head of the Baylor. This Baylor and the companion he summoned ended up in the same state. Perhaps he was more miserable. At least the Baylor's head was only smashed, and he didn't taste the pain of being cut in half. The Baylor that lost its head, or rather the upper half, wanted to capture the golem warrior that attacked at close range. Burn this bastard to death. That was the only thought he had before he died. But this thought did not come to fruition. Keys, who had dealt with the harassment of the Boda corpse, teleported to the side of the demon's body. A railgun directly blasted the body of the Baylor into a rain of blood before it could be used. Saving is glorious. Wasting is shameful. Can't waste a spell that has already been prepared. This was Keys's explanation to number 21's complaint of friendly harm afterward. But his action of secretly putting away part of the remaining lower half of the Baylor's body made this explanation more suspicious. But fortunately, the 2 Baylors that suddenly appeared were killed, and the crisis of the camp was finally over. In order to help the Sawajan shaman that was suddenly drained of a large amount of magic power and was in grave danger under the attacks of the Boda corpses, QYKH replaced the acting commander of the chained demons that had been slaughtered by the Baylor demons. He gave the order to the remaining barb demons and the other mercenaries from the other planes to eliminate the remaining demon army. This guy still didn't erase the word acting in the end. Keys could not help but sigh as he looked at the corpse of the chained demon that gradually turned into a pool of bubbling mud due to its death. Chapter 46. Those who survived were satisfied. Quest had obtained full authority to command the mercenary camp from another plane. Not only that, on the other end of the communication circle, the devils of Batsu used prophecy magic to repeatedly confirm that there was indeed a fruitful result of killing 2 Baylor demons. The soldiers and resources that were lost in the battle were guaranteed to be immediately replenished. Not only that, the Batsu devil also promised Keys that they would send an emissary to award Keys a medal. Brew was appointed to be in charge of logistics. With the replenishment of mercenaries from various planes, there would be plenty of food from different worlds waiting for him to taste. As for the insufficient portions of the mercenaries, naturally, Barthos' special military canned meat would make up for the lack of food. With the convenience of this position, as a gourmet, he could foresee that his recipes would be greatly enriched. In the end, Nair got what he wanted. Although most of the chained demon's protective chains had rusted away along with its body after being killed by the Baylor, there was still a small portion of the animated chains that remained. After obtaining these precious materials from the intermediate demon, the ogre blacksmith stayed in the forge all day long, sweating profusely. He had a dozen ideas on how to use these materials that he needed to experiment with. Seeing that his 2 brothers had found jobs that they liked, the witch Dr. Peru volunteered to be Key's experimental assistant. After the demons attacked the city, they left behind a large amount of materials that were hard to find in the material plane. Some of them were even flesh from the Baylor. After a large number of experiments, Key's knowledge of demon anatomy and Paru's new voodoo techniques improved by leaps and bounds every day. As for mechanical golem number 21 and goblin Ricknaz, after the battle, They had more ideas about the design of the prototype machine that they had developed together. The two of them worked intensively on making temporary adjustments to the prototype machine. During this period of time, the ogre Neru was the most in contact with them, who also stayed in the forge of the camp. This ogre, who aspired to become the best weaponsmith, had been invited to try out the precision machine tool that the goblin Renaz had brought over to process the parts of the prototype machine. He had gotten along well with the goblin mechanical puppet duo, and he had even gifted a portion of the chain demon's animated chains to mechanical puppet number 21, who was also interested in it. Of course, not everyone was completely unsatisfied. As one of the only two high-tier spellcasters in the camp, the Sawajan Ocean Shaman had always held a grudge over being captured and turned into a power bank for Golem number 21. Still, she had to spend her energy preparing a substantial amount of electric spells every day to strengthen the half-golem guards, which was why she rarely had a chance, and no one to complain about. These peaceful days were only temporary. Looking at the daily shipment of war resources and the mercenaries from other planes sent by the blood-armored demons, Quest knew that the true test could begin at any moment. The ambush they encountered by the demon vanguard was only the tip of the iceberg of the entire bloody war. Perhaps not long after Avernus fully came into contact with the abyssal plane, his camp might suddenly appear somewhere in the abyss, just like the demon army that had appeared out of nowhere. At that time, this place would truly become an isolated island, facing the onslaught of the Thanner-Reed demons alone like the waves in the ocean. Perhaps to prove Keyes' conjecture about the impending war, ever since the two Balers were killed, not only did the demon patrols that provided supplies and the demon convoys that transported mercenaries come to the camp more frequently, but even some merchant groups came to this remote camp to sell their goods. The merchant groups that dared to take advantage of the outbreak of the Blood War and come to the front lines to make a fortune were naturally not made up of creatures from the material plane. The members of the merchant groups were a group of old Onababas and perhaps some Yugoloths that came from the scorching inferno and belonged to the neutral evil faction. They were the bosses behind the scenes. In order to obtain blood money, these fellows wandered the various strongholds of the abyssal plane and the infernal plane. The old Onababas who were proficient in shape-shifting always transformed into various beautiful female creatures, especially beautiful elves, so that they could provide some helpful help when discussing the price of goods with their customers. Oh ho ho, my dear little boy, I guess this must be your first time participating in a blood war. Perhaps this big sister can provide you with some help. The old ghost woman transformed into a wood elf with bronze skin with some green embellishments. She blinked her bright brown eyes and smiled sweetly as she enthusiastically promoted her various treasures to the customers in front of her. Oh, my dear little boy, I guess this must be your first time participating in a blood war. Perhaps you need an indestructible sword, much better than the one on your waist. What do you think of this sword that once belonged to a high-grade paladin? Or perhaps you don't want to run in front of those cruel Tana, re-barbarians, and smell their body odor. I have to say that this is a wise idea. Perhaps you need this equipment, an arcane staff stolen by a legendary thief from the famous Archmage Elminster. With it, you can stand at a distance and shoot all kinds of spells at will. Bayubu, how interesting. Or perhaps he really is a picky customer. Fortunately, Big Sister has enough stock here. For example, this talisman that can help you resist death once. I spent a lot of effort to get this talisman from that stingy death god, Nero. If you like it, I can sell it to you at cost price. It really can be found everywhere. Only $998, only $998, Keyes thought. He did not need to look carefully to know that this ugly creature in a good-looking skin was peddling some fake goods. Those fake magic auras would disappear after a few days, but by then, those fellows who went to the battlefield would probably not have the chance to come back and cause trouble for them. The reason why he spent time in contact with these fake merchants was that in addition to producing and selling fake goods, they sometimes played the role of informers. Thanks to the commercial network of Bator and the Abyss, they could occasionally obtain valuable information that was more timely than the spies sent by Bator. Not wanting to continue listening to this old woman's TV shopping sales tactics, Keyes imitated the tone commonly used by demons and said bluntly Stop your tricks. Don't waste my time with these lousy things to fool bumpkins. I want to see someone in your caravan who has a say. Maybe I can find something worth spending some money on from her." The old woman did not get angry because she was interrupted because her eyes were attracted by an excellent soul prism that the young man in front of her kept tossing up and down in his hand. Because the soul of the victim was imprisoned in the crystal, it glowed brightly and caught the ugly creature's eye. Demons above, that was the best currency in the underworld. Even in the chaotic, bottomless abyss, that thing was the hard currency of the purchasing power clans. Even the worst soul prism was worth more than 10 gold calamity coins, or more than 100 hexahedral steel coins that circulated in the scorching hell. This kind of high-grade currency was very attractive to the demons in the underworld, whether it was to play with it or directly absorb the souls imprisoned in it to strengthen oneself. I can tell that you're a big shot who knows the business. Of course, I'm very honored to serve you. Although the old woman was trying her best to please the customer in front of her, her eyes did not move away from the soul prism that was constantly tossing up and down. But I think you also know that the person in charge of the caravan is usually very busy and not easy to talk to. If you disturb them rashly, there will be some difficulties. Chapter 47. In the lower plains, it was not difficult to get a ghost to grind the mill, especially when it was paid with a hard currency like the soul prism. The old Onababa, who was carrying a huge sum of money, carefully led quests around a large group of black-hearted fellows who were swindling in the trading area planned by the camp. They walked to a small, unattended tent beside the fence where the caravan had placed the camel beasts. She picked up a heart-shaped amulet that she carried with her and held it in her palm. Then, she used the amulet to fiddle with a row of tassel curtains hanging from the tent's door frame. It was as if she was playing a harp with a plectrum. "Oh, sir, please don't mind. The president has added many protective spells on it. Only by opening it with the correct key can we avoid some unnecessary trouble." As if she was worried that keys would be slighted because of the delay in opening the door, the old Onababa explained with a smile. The spell on the tassel curtains seemed to be activated by the correct key, and a secret mark appeared on the curtains. The old Onababa quickly activated the secret mark on her amulet. After the two matched, the tent's curtains automatically opened. Under the lead of the old Onababa, they stepped through the tent's door and walked in. At first, Quest thought that this inconspicuous tent would at most have a level 4 Li Almeng's hut attached to it. But when he came in, he found that a level 7 Mordenkainen's mansion was fixed here. Really scammed a lot of money. Stepping on the perfect hexagonal steel floor that was obviously in the style of the scorching inferno, Key saw the old Onababa respectfully bowing to the president of the Chamber of Commerce, who was sitting behind a huge desk copying documents. She also introduced some of the requirements of the rich man she brought. As expected, this guy who hid his entire body in a leather-hooded robe with only a jackal-like and dog-like face was the real boss of this Chamber of Commerce. And he was indeed a Yugoloth demon. To be more precise, he was a Yugoloth judge demon. Judge demons were the scribes, file managers, negotiators, and middlemen of the Yugoloth demons in the scorching inferno. Just like the contract fiends who lived in the 9 prisons of Bader, these neutral and evil fiends were born with the ability to speak and write various known languages. However, due to the rules of the Yugoloth society in the Scorched Inferno, they had to obey the jurisdiction of the adjudicators, who had a higher status but weren't as powerful as them. Many adjudicators chose to leave the Scorched Inferno and come to the hell of Bator or the bottomless abyss to make a living. This kind of evil spirit was born to be good at manipulating magic skills. Through learning, most of them could become excellent warlocks or magicians. However, in terms of close combat, they were not much stronger than the Combat 5 trash. With their average strength and agility, it was thanks to their brains that they were able to survive in the lower realms. The president of the Judgment Magic Chamber of Commerce didn't even finish listening to the old woman's lengthy explanation. He silently cast a malicious transfiguration spell, temporarily turning the old woman from a beautiful wood elf girl into a small lizard with a forked tongue running around anxiously. For this, The Judgment Magic Chamber of Commerce had no choice but to add another secondary field cage spell. Hey, look, these female little fellows never know how to be concise and comprehensive. They don't know what all that time is money, is life. They habitually nag and jump up and down whenever they encounter a problem. It's really terrible. The Judge Demon Chamber of Commerce stood up from behind the desk with a scroll in his hand and walked to Keys. He put his palms together and performed a magician's greeting. He saw that the old woman was still struggling in the cage. He seemed to be a little dissatisfied with this rude behavior and made a hand gesture with the beginning of an acid ball. The old woman immediately stopped struggling. Seeing that his deterrence was successful, the Judge Demon Chamber of Commerce revealed a satisfied smile. May I know what you need specifically? I need to estimate the price. Of course, if you use a hard currency like the Soul Prism, as that little fellow said, I can make the decision and give you a VIP discount of 10%. The situation of the opponents in this blood war, the division of forces, whether there's a third party that may participate in the war, as well as the cultivation methods that some high-level warriors commonly use. After taking charge of a camp, he would receive a corresponding daily salary and allowance in Batoer. The currency of payment was the Soul Prism. Only then did he know that the chained demons wanted to climb up the ranks so that they could get rid of the meaning of the word agent. This meant that there would be more Soul Prism to take every day, which was greatly beneficial for demons to increase their own strength. This new income gave Keys enough confidence when shopping. He did not want to use those impure souls to strengthen himself, so he was not as stingy as the Batsu when it came to the Soul Prism. It was better for him to make the best use of it. Yes, I understand. The Judge Demon Chamber of Commerce made a gesture, and a quill pen that had automatically recorded the items that Keys mentioned on a scroll stopped writing. The list was dragged by the unseen servant into the hands of the Chamber of Commerce's president. Let's start with the simplest. The cultivation techniques of high-level warriors. Let me think. Although he said that he wanted to think, the Judge Demon Chamber of Commerce immediately controlled the unseen servant to take out a small booklet that was not properly bound. To be honest, those boorish men who like to play with swords and spears. Oh, I'm not talking about you. The Judge Demon Chamber of Commerce saw that Keys was dressed in light armor and had a long sword at his waist, and apologized for accidentally offending him. Creatures who are used to close combat, even if they're divine warriors who believe in gods, or powerful monks who can cultivate to the highest level and become immortal, still rely on their instincts and some shallow techniques to increase their combat ability. Perhaps their attacks are unstoppable, and their defense is impenetrable, but these abilities, other than the most basic techniques, do not have any other tricks that can be taught. What is powerful is themselves, and not their cultivation methods. The Judge Demon Chamber of Commerce suddenly stopped talking and looked at Keys with a you-know expression. After being rewarded with a calamity coin, the Demon Chamber of Commerce continued his narration. Of course, just like the basic laws of the entire multiverse, chaos and order, good and evil, natural opposites but interdependent. There's also a small group of warriors. Among them, there is a cultivation method that can continuously improve their combat skills. They divide different types of techniques into different fighting schools, among which the most complete system is the White Raven School that is good at group actions and is proficient in joint attacks. The Ironheart School that prefers fine control of the body and weapons. Similar to the Paladins, the Devout School that relies on faith to fight. Through training the nerves and the mind, the Steel Soul School that is as good as a Gale in offense and defense. The Rock Dragon School that focuses on increasing strength, destructive power, and defensive power. The Tiger Claw School that stimulates the body's bestial instincts and violently attacks while dodging. The Shadow Hand School that is proficient in concealment and sneak attacks and can use the body to control negative energy and shadow energy. The Twilight School that is known for their sleeping and throwing techniques and rarely loses in one-on-one combat. The Desert Wind School that uses martial arts to control flames and focuses on area of effect damage. These martial arts schools are spread in the remote corners of the multiverse, and there are very few people there. The knowledge of martial arts that occasionally comes from the mouth of the plainer travelers, and when it reaches the ears of the knowledgeable scholars, it is mostly superficial names. After all, most plainer travelers are skilled spellcasters, and most of them don't know anything about martial arts, or they don't care about them at all. However, it just so happens that I have been to a plane where warriors are rampant. As a Yugoloth merchant who is good at recording, I won't be as superficial as the bumpkins of the material plane. Thus, I have properly recorded some of the knowledge that I traded from the hands of the warriors with extraordinary martial arts. Although it's definitely incomplete, I can guarantee that all the recorded content has been tested with divination magic to ensure that it's accurate and accurate. Moreover, as the saying goes, the less something is precious. Seeing that this judge demon was doing the same TV shopping promotion as the old Onababa under him, Quest hurriedly interrupted him. 20 soul prisms. That is the highest price I can accept. I won't agree to less than 40. Boy, you have to know that knowledge is priceless. Hee, Yugoloth demon, do you think I'm that easy to trick? That book is just a copy of Spell. There are at most 25 soul prisms. Boy, if you miss this opportunity, I'm afraid you will never be able to find this rare knowledge rubbing. 35 soul prisms, fixed price. Can you refund these things within 7 days without a reason? Can you waive delivery fees? Can you have the patience of a customer service lady? The judgment demon didn't understand the first 2 words. He only understood the word customer service lady that Keys used in Inferno language. He originally wanted to reply that his merchant guild had more than 30 old ghost nannies to service. But looking at the fellow locked in the secondary force field cage and recalling the true appearance of the old ghost nannies, he could only helplessly reply Keys with the word no. Although the judgment demon was a greedy and cunning black-hearted merchant, his words were usually consistent with his words and disdain to lie. So, without these after-sale service terms, why should I pay so much money for your incomplete books? Or rather, other than me, who else would pay you even a green corner? Those brainless demons that don't know how to read? Or those demons that crave power and more power every day? Or do you think that among the bumpkins that came here from the material plane, who would have the mind to restart their training at the front lines? No one else. This is an absolute buyer's market. As if to strengthen his aura, Keys took a step forward like the judgment demon. This action made the judgment demon, who is useless in close combat, quickly retreat. Friend, even if you did pay a price to obtain this knowledge, but if you can't sell it, you will never get anything in return. As a qualified merchant, you should learn the word stop-loss, right? 27 soul prisms, my final bid. What will be used to pay is not the tacky calamity coin, nor is it the silver coin that will act like a poisonous pincer. More importantly, it will be the magnetic coin that will stick to your other hexahedral steel coins and never be separated. Think about the feeling of those beautiful crystals that contain soul power colliding in your money bag. When negotiating, Keys was more demonic than a demon. Using the valuable experience he gained from bargaining with Mobo Merchant on Mobo, the Blue Dragon youth actually made the cunning Yugoloth magic merchant speechless. If there was something like an attribute panel, Keys' skill level in bargaining, clever words, and bluffing would all increase rapidly. Chapter 48. Alright, deal. But I would like to ask, are you interested in joining my guild as a training instructor? After receiving a definite negative reply, the Judgment Fiend could only pass the rubbing to Keth. He then carefully checked the pouch of soul prism that Keth paid for it twice. After confirming that there were no mistakes, he carefully kept it in the inner pocket of his robe. As if it wanted to get back at Lucian, the Yugoloth calmed down and used the 2 spells Fox's Cunning and Owl's Insight on itself to temporarily increase its intelligence and perception. Then, a confident smile appeared on its jackal-like face that could scare a child to tears appeared on its face. Eloquent boy. The next exchange of information about the Blood War is a little complicated. First, the Judgment Demon reached into the many pockets of his robe and found some fine sand that glowed with fluorescent light. After throwing it into the air, he chanted a short spell. This was the only spell Keys saw that this demon needed materials and chance to cast. It seems to be some kind of high-level anti-detection spell. Keys made a basic judgment, and at the same time, he was secretly on guard against any sudden attacks. Feeling the vigilance of the boy in front of him, the judgment demon explained after finishing his spell, "Don't worry, there won't be any flames or ice that will interfere with our exchange. This is just a small preparation. Before every exchange of information, I will prepare the corresponding anti-detection spell." It's better to be prepared. Keys didn't know if he was explaining his actions or praising the Yugoloth's caution, but he only replied with one sentence. "That's right. It's a good habit to be prepared." The judgment demon stroked his few strands of beard as if he was extremely confident in the anti-detection spell he cast. He no longer spoke softly like before. Instead, he used a voice that was between a dog's bark and a wolf's howl to loudly echo Keys's words in the Inferno language. "Boy, I admit that you are indeed an expert when it comes to business. But for the next exchange, I've also made sufficient preparations." Clapping his hands, the unseen servant handed over an hourglass that was only the size of a wine bottle that halflings used to drink. "From now on, every word I say is extremely valuable information about the Blood War. I guarantee that you will feel that it's worth it." However, the Yugoloth merchant snapped his fingers, and the hourglass floated in front of Keys. At the same time, the sand above began to fall. "There's no price for this deal. Now, every time the sand in the hourglass runs out, you have to pay 3 soul prisms. As for whether you are willing to pay the bill or not, boy, you can pick up the hourglass anytime. I won't stop you." As expected, those who could do business in the lower realms were quite capable. They actually knew the tricks of hunger marketing and time-sharing payment. Keys threw the 3 soul prisms into Judgment Fiend's outstretched hand, indicating that he agreed to the trade. The Ugro's magic merchant shook the reward in his hand and revealed a satisfied expression as he slowly said, "That's right. The fact that you're interested in information about the blood battle means that you're not just an ordinary soldier that the devils dragged over from the material plane. According to the information that our merchant guild obtained from the higher-ups of the Batsu people, the acting commander of the camp had already perished in an encounter. The one who replaced him as the actual commander of this camp should be you. This time, it's different from the past. It's not the current lord of Avernus, Bayer, but the noble evil dragon god, the 5-headed dragon god Tiamat, as the commander of the entire Blood War. This is rare. Even in the entire history of the Blood War, there were not many times that a great true god participated in it. Other than the issue of the commander, there's something else that's unusual. The location of this battle is not the Gray Plains where battles often break out. The two sides are also not fighting for the control of the 10,000 Abyss Plains and Avernus. This may not match the information that the other devils have revealed to you. The Abyss and Bador are more often evenly matched. There were some signs of infiltration in this war, which had happened several times before. The 9 prisons of Bader's Avernus and a certain level of the Abyss are pushed by someone. It's more likely that it's the work of a demon prince or a demon lord. Some areas overlap. The armies of devils and demons fight each other. The final victor will obtain an additional reward in addition to the faction reward of the Blood War territory. In this kind of battle, the devils usually have the upper hand. At least in the past, there were only a few infiltration battles that ended with the devils' final victory. Hence, they were captured by Avernus in several levels of the Abyss, pulled out of the Chaos faction, and gradually assimilated into Hell. A new land in Hell. At this point, Judgment Fiend stopped talking. The hourglass had already finished. According to the agreement, Kays handed over 3 soul prisms to the evil demon before continuing. This kind of plain infiltration almost always brings great benefits to the devils, but the devils rarely take the initiative to use this kind of battle method. The reason is the huge investment in the early stages that is proportional to the income. According to the statistics of the Batsu's higher-ups, in order to push Avernus to completely overlap with the Abyss, it requires the power of a medium god to create a complete avatar. This avatar is almost equivalent to a god with weak divine power. Even if it's a partial overlap, it requires at least a weak god to consume a complete avatar. With the strength of a weak divine power of the evil dragon goddess Tiamat. In order to achieve this, it can be said that it will consume a lot of energy. It's important to note that this is only the investment required before the battle. And in order to achieve complete victory, according to past experience, it will require at least 200 years of war. During this period, there may be attacks from other demon lords or even demon princes. Even with the support of the Batsa Devil, the five-headed dragon queen will have to bear a huge risk in this war. Unless she has a reason to do so. Judgment Fiend stopped talking once again and revealed a smile as if his scheme had succeeded. Kizu was eager to know these secrets could only pay as promised. Boy, or Lord Commander, you have made a wise choice. The most lasting influence a person can hope to leave behind in the Blood War is to become a small footnote in the annals of the war. It's a pity that in billions of years, only a few mortals have such an honor. Of course, those wise gods are not included. Do you know why mortals are mostly cannon fodder in the Blood War? Almost everyone who participates in the Blood War thinks that their own strength is too weak and the scale of the war is too large. But this is only part of the reason. Between the two sides of the war, the merchants of Yugoloth who have carefully wandered around for many eras have a different opinion. Mortals are mostly short-sighted and participate in the Blood War in hopes of obtaining power. It's easy for them to become addicted to the battle and give up on thinking. When waving swords and preparing spells occupy all of the brain, leaving no space to think about the true motive of the war, it is also the time when a living being is about to reach the end of the war. But it seems that you are an exception with a clever mind. In order to congratulate your wisdom and to congratulate me for finding a long-term trading partner, the above words will be a discount, and I will not charge you any fees. This time, the Judgment Fiend fiddled with the half-fallen hourglass and let it start counting again. Chapter 49. As a mortal, trying to guess the plans of the gods is definitely a whimsical idea. Even legendary wizards who are most proficient in language spells would find it difficult to pry into the true thoughts of those great beings. However, this does not prevent us from trying to deduce the possible motives from another angle. According to Batsu's higher-ups, we have already learned that the target of the Dragon Queen's battle is the 473rd layer of the Abyss, the Acid Fog Canyon Plane. The one leading this plane is a new type of Tana, reed demon known as the Acid Fogworm. They are created from the souls of countless ignorant followers and evil helpers who fell into the abyss. The one who created this demon officially informed the new demon lord of this layer. It is a giant worm created by the previous Baylor Lord, and it has successfully defeated and devoured its creator. Its name is the Worm Tyrant. As this plane is too dangerous for ordinary demons, my merchant did not set up a trading point in it. Only the Yugoloth demons of my race who are engaged in shipping on the river Styx have passed on some information regarding this place. The information either cannot be verified, or it sounds very much like rumors. It's just that I found an interesting piece of information among these rumors. Asking for payment again. This Yugoloth merchant was like a web novelist who was good at digging holes. Step by step, he enticed Keys to pay for the information he spoke of. Of course, Keys still chose to continue listening to him. On one hand, his wallet was not an urgent need for now. On the other hand, he felt that the evil demon's words were not all empty words. The judgment demon who was paid seemed to have the motivation to continue speaking. That terrifying worm tyrant, after continuously achieving successes that even his predecessor, the Baylor Lord, could not hope to achieve, he set his sights on how to get his hands on the throne of the gods. At the beginning of ruling the Acid Fog Canyon Plane, in order to increase his own strength, he relied on unimaginable tricks to successfully lure a large number of high-ranked spellcasters to become his guests. Then, he turned them all into his little desserts. The desserts that gave him the greatest satisfaction with a large number of dragon-type creatures, especially the evil dragons led by the Penachet dragons. As it had devoured a large number of dragons, it had even evolved some dragon bloodline characteristics. This way, if the devil overlord successfully ascended to godhood, its clergy would most likely be involved in a domain that was threatening to the evil dragon god. As a demon lord, he had the direct favor of the bottomless abyss. If he were to become a great deity, Her Highness Tiamat would have no way to deal with him. Therefore, the Dragon Queen's expedition this time was to gain the initiative by striking first. According to reliable sources, the other dragon gods, even the platinum dragon god Bahamut, the Dragon Queen's enemy, did not want such a person to appear among the dragon gods. His Highness even restricted the fights between the good dragons and the evil dragons during this period of time. A total of 30 soul prisms. After listening to the Yugoloth merchant's information, the soul prism that Keys had accumulated over the past 2 days was no longer enough to pay for his needs. Boy, do you want to owe a reasonable payment to a legitimate Yugoloth merchant? After Keys showed the empty money bag to the judgment demon, the demon's expression suddenly changed. He pulled off the hood that he had been wearing, and the eyes on the jackal-like head flashed coldly. Or do you want to do a mortgage business? This is also an acceptable way of payment, but there will be a small handling fee. I refuse. Doing a mortgage business with a Yugoloth demon was simply booking his future in advance. Keys did not intend to become a sad person imprisoned in a soul prism. I will pay with a perfect soul prism. The value of a soul prism lay in the imprisoned soul inside, and a perfect soul prism was the product of only completing the last wish of the imprisoned soul. Once this condition was met, the imprisoned soul would also be purified, and the originally impure soul energy would undergo a qualitative change like rotten wine, turning into fine wine. The value of such a soul prism would also increase by leaps and bounds. 73 Normal Soul Prism. Keys said confidently to the judgment demon, who was captivated by the term perfect soul prism and did not consider the question of how the poor boy could conjure something of a higher value. Before I came, I used a spell to check the real-time official exchange rate of the 9th level of Bator Nessus. A perfect soul prism is worth 73 normal soul prism. After that, Keys walked towards the maliciously deformed old Onababa, who was trapped by the secondary field cage. The young man's right hand clenched into a fist and directly passed through the barrier, dispelling the old woman's transformation. This scene caused the judgment demon, who was watching from the side, to feel his heart skip a beat. Out of caution, he chose to cast more defensive spells on himself. It's a good habit to be prepared. Keys joked as he silently cast a hold monster spell, nailing the old Onababa who had just dispelled her maliciously transformed back into an ugly old witch with a pointy nose. Taking out a soul prism that the old Onababa had hidden, Keys explained to the judgment demon beside him. The soul imprisoned in this soul prism was a fellow who had once come to Bator to participate in the Blood War, intending to make a fortune from the war. This unfortunate fellow had listened to the deceitful words of some unscrupulous merchants and used his entire fortune to exchange for some so-called divine artifacts. As you can imagine, the huge difference between the seller's show and the buyer's show caused this unfortunate fellow to lose his soul. His greatest wish was to exact his revenge on these unscrupulous merchants. As the explanation ended, Keys pulled out his sword, the Frosty Hell iron sword that was tempered by the future master forger Ogreneru. The sword's weight was reasonable. It was convenient for slashing. The blade was also very sharp, so it easily chopped off the head of the old Onababa, who was nailed to the ground. Throwing the soul prism in his hand that seemed to have been tempered, and its brilliance had become abnormally pure to the Yugoloth merchant who was carefully guarding against him, Karth said, "Don't worry." An old Onababa, who had received the most complete training in the art of speech and obtained the title of master salesman. The price in Bader's slave market is 20 normal soul prism. Previously, I still owe you the last 3 normal soul prism. A perfect soul prism is worth 73 soul prism. Mr. Judgment Demon, you should also give me 50 soul prisms. They were currently in a military camp in Bator, and the actual controller of this military camp had demonstrated a spellcasting ability that was on par with or even stronger than him. The Yugoloth merchant did not dare to go back on his word. Holding the 50-soul prism and the 9-sword sect combat manual, Keys, who had walked to the door, turned around and said to the Yugoloth merchant, "Mr. Judgment Demon, shouldn't a professional merchant like you say thank you for your patronage or welcome your next visit?" Chapter 50. After the demon's attack was completely defeated, only some bloody bones and rocks were left on the battlefield. The wailing and rotting smell would disappear, and the demons would collect the more complete corpses of the Tana-reaped demons to be dissected and studied by the new commander of the camp. Those who still had a breath left would be taken away by the patrols that came to the settlement regularly to add bricks to the skull pillar that was always under construction in Avernus. As for the broken corpses of the demons and the fallen defenders, the fireballs that fell from the sky of Avernus would bury some of them, while the rest would become food for the various wandering creatures of Bator or the captive lowlifes. Perhaps some would even be dragged into some military-kin food processing plant. Who knew? Perhaps it was because of the plentiful results of killing the 2 Balers, but the mercenary camp from another plane had a higher strategic value in the eyes of the Batsa-Devil bureaucrats. More mercenaries who came from other worlds to participate in the Blood War were arranged to be stationed here one after another. Following that, more war resources and supplies were provided. With sufficient manpower, the second layer of the defensive wall that had been destroyed in the battle outside the camp was quickly repaired. Even a third layer of the defensive position was in the process of being built in full swing. All kinds of races gathered here, and the originally isolated and crude camp quickly developed into the embryonic form of a town fortress. Other than the warehouses used to store food and other supplies, the barracks for the mercenaries, and the smithy for the repair and forging of weapons, these were the necessary facilities of a military camp, and the scale was constantly expanding. Small taverns where the mercenaries could drink to their heart's content, open-air gambling dens, and commercial stalls for trading goods had also quietly appeared in the camp. Where there were people, there would be trouble. Not long ago, during the Demon Army's siege, Dalton, who had relied on his keen observation and flexible mind to escape with his life, had recruited some survivors from the original Broom Eyebrows gang and also gained new followers from other planes. This was another advantage of having a flexible mind. Dalton, who had learned the basic Inferno language, could communicate with the creatures from other planes without much effort. "Boss Dalton, I saw something good over there at those metal spirit peddlers." The one who spoke was a Seronian. It had the head of a deer and the body of a human. It had a kind and beautiful appearance, but in fact, it was a ferocious monster that liked to use its large hands to strangle its enemies to death. "Idiot, it's an elven vendor." Dalton, who was picking his nails with a knife, raised his eyebrows and glanced at the guy. He said gloomily, "If you're not nimble enough, that tongue of yours will be useless. In our soft Maple City, grilled deer tongue is a famous dish. If you want to control these ferocious guys, you have to be even more ferocious than them." This was Dalton's common technique. "Tell me, what did you see?" "Dragon hide armor. Armor made from the impervious skin of a red dragon." Dalton's original Rot-Tan armor was quickly scrapped in close combat with the demons, and he was not used to wearing metal plate armor to fight. Recently, he had been using some inferior goods to deal with it. Therefore, when he heard the news, he was very interested. He immediately brought a group of his subordinates to the stall that sold the dragon leather armor to see what was going on. "Hey, sir, are you also interested in this leather armor? This is the best product made from the strongest red dragon of the Penishade, Megalosaurus. It was tanned repeatedly by many master craftsmen for 49 days and nights to complete." Another old ghost woman who used magic to disguise herself as an elf was promoting her product. Looking at the skeptical look of the customer in front of her, the sales master picked up a broken dagger from her stall. She aimed at the tricky joint of the dragon leather armor and stabbed the dagger with both hands. With a crisp ding, the broken blade of the dagger, which was often used for performances, was damaged again. "This is a genuine dragon skin armor. It could be the most solid protection for your little life." The old hag vendor threw the dagger to the side without leaving a trace. Then, as if she was striking while the iron was hot, she said to the customer who had just finished watching her performance. It is said that the red dragon that was used as the source of the material wailed for 3 days and 3 nights before its skin was completely peeled off. Its painful wailing also lasted for 3 days and 3 nights. This is the secret to making dragon skin armor. After going through this ritual, the dragon skin is already tough and thick, so it won't be damaged by any ordinary iron. It also has a certain degree of resistance against the breath of the fire dragon. How much? 2 voices asked at the same time. A weak bandit leader and a young girl who is still wet behind the ears. The 2 people who asked for the price looked at each other and then had an evaluation of each other in their hearts. Not far away, the golem and the ogre Neru, who were also strolling in the commercial area, saw the situation. Number 21 said in an educating tone, "Look, the big guy Neru. Someone is going to be scammed by the old ghost woman again. There is no Consumer Protection Association here, and there are no official customer service staff. If someone is scammed, it will be difficult to find the scammer who slipped away." The ogre blacksmith had bought an expensive weapon from the commercial area because he was excited by the prospect. After he brought it to the workshop and showed it to the golem and Riknaz, he was immediately pointed out by the goblin scholar, who was proficient in all kinds of mechanical processes and had a high professional level, that he had bought a fake. So, the ogre dragged his new good friend, the golem warrior, to look for the seller and prepare to argue with him. Unfortunately, the 2 of them wandered around for a long time and did not see the black-hearted seller who sold the fake goods. For safety reasons, once the goods were successfully sold, the old ghost woman would immediately change her appearance after the customer left. If only Paulu or Brew were here, they would definitely remember the person's appearance. If not, they would remember the person's smell. Hey, that ogre just now is back. Keek keek. At this time, the old ghost woman who had changed her appearance and was holding a dragon leather armor glanced at the person she had successfully scammed from the corner of her eyes. She could not help but feel proud. This was the scene that made her happiest. She stood by the side and admired the regret and annoyance that her scam brought. "Hey, elf girl, did you hear that? How much is this leather armor?" Oh, thank you for your patronage. You can take this high-grade goods that are cleared out for 50 calamity coins." Seeing that someone was about to take the bait again, the old ghost woman quickly withdrew her attention and said with a flattering expression, it was still within the price range that he could afford. Dalton nodded with satisfaction and prepared to pay. A crystal pillar-like currency was thrown to the old ghost woman by the female warrior who had inquired with Dalton. A soul prism. The quick-witted old Anababa grabbed the high-grade currency of the underworld. After showing an apologetic expression to Dalton, her eyes were attracted by the prismatic crystal in her hand that was shining with soul light. She kept stroking this little cutie that she had only received a few times in her many years of business. When the deer-headed Seronian subordinate saw that someone dared to intercept his boss, he could not help but jump out and curse. He was ready to show his face in front of his new boss. As soon as he started cursing in the infernal language, he was slapped back down by Dalton. Broom Eyebrows, who had been in Bodor for quite some time, was gradually able to easily measure a person's worth, just like when he was in Soft Maple City. This little girl in front of him, who he thought was still wet behind the ears, was able to casually take out a high-grade currency that was worth 50 or more gold coins. It was obvious that she was not an easy person to deal with. The scene of his subordinate offending a big shot and causing trouble for him was still fresh in his mind. Glancing coldly at the deer-headed Seronian who was trying to insult her, the female warrior who paid with the soul prism said to the old ghost woman, "I want to see the effects of this dragon skin armor. Put on and show it to me." After receiving the payment, the old ghost woman put on the dragon skin armor neatly and showed it to the female warrior. Is this dragon skin armor really invulnerable? Of course, it has already been tested. Can it really resist the breath of a megalosaurus? Of course, this is a red dragon. Chapter 51. Just like the needle-leaf moss in Avernus, it could only emerge for a short while when the rain of fire stopped before it was burned to ashes. The good mood that Quest had just gained from the black-hearted merchant, Ugros, was washed away by this distant relative in a sense. Kryphia, a female adult red dragon who had just reached adulthood, was standing in front of Keys. As the youngest direct descendant of the Dragon Queen and the most favored red dragon bloodline among the five-colored Megalosaurus, Kryphia was also a rising star that received a lot of attention in the evil dragon court. The reason why such an important person would condescend to come to this camp was to fulfill the promise that the evil Dragon Council and Batsu's higher-ups had made to Keys for killing the two Baylor demons. Everything had been going smoothly. Kryphia, who had transformed into a female warrior, used her red dragon bloodline and powerful strength as a descendant of a god to pass through the unsafe path alone due to the impending planar infiltration and the harassment of scattered demon armies. She entered the otherworldly mercenary camp under Keys's rule. However, because an unscrupulous old ghost woman peddling dragon leather armor made of red dragon skin, this young and aggressive female red dragon was directly angered. He unsheathed the greatsword on his back and executed a cross slash, slicing the old woman into 4 pieces. Still angry, she transformed into her adult red dragon body and used a flame breath to turn half of the business district in the camp to dust. She even wiped out a portion of the otherworldly mercenaries. Although you're not strong enough as a young blue dragon, you don't have to be so polite to that Yugoloth demon just now. I could take care of that guy for you before I leave. The red dragon girl, who had transformed into her human form and was leaning against the wall with her arms crossed, said nonchalantly as she watched Kays persuade the judgment demon who came to ask for compensation to leave. Kith frowned as he turned his back to the masculine red dragon, who completely fit the role of a Chinibu girl. He made a helpless expression at the 3 ogre brothers and the 2 goblin golem duo before he adjusted his expression and turned back to speak. Officer Kryphia, these are all trivial matters. There's no need to take it to heart. Let's talk about the appointment that you didn't finish talking about. The appointment was made by the evil Dragon Council in Bardo's first-layer strategic defense attack and logistics department. Kryphia, the Red Dragon, added the name of the Batsu Devil's superior department, which Keys could not remember even with his memory. She straightened her face and said solemnly, based on the wish of the great Dragon Queen, the evil Dragon Council and the Strategic Defense, Attack, and Logistics Bureau of the first level of Batsu Devil have suggested that the primary strategic goal of this bloody battle is to completely destroy all living demonic races on the 473rd level of the Abyss. In order to show her firm tone towards this order, Kryphia drew the huge sword that was as big as a door on her back and stabbed it into the stone floor of the new camp commander's staff room. The wrath of the Megalosaurus shall pour down upon the heads of the demons who dare to offend the Dragon Queen's majesty. The breath of the Penishade dragon shall purify the plain that is filled with blasphemy, destroy all life, and plunge the earth into the hell of Bador. Then, what is the order of the army under my command? Keys was a little speechless as he looked at the female red dragon, who still could not explain the specific details of the appointment. However, he still went along with her tone and asked. Kryphia pressed down on the ball of the huge sword with one hand and pressed it down deeply. The huge sword sank a little deeper into the ground. Based on your achievements in defeating the 2 Baylors, the camp under your command will become the first batch of advanced fortresses after the plane overlaps with the Abyss. You will share this glory with the other 99 camps. You will build a Hellgate fortress for the army of Bador that can attack from other planes. God have mercy! Keys was originally arranged to be in this remote camp by the old Dragon Sorota's connections so that he could have a higher chance of escaping unscathed. However, for some inexplicable reason, they were attacked by the demonic vanguard and were forced to fight 2 Baylors. It was not easy to kill the Baylors, but they were asked to carry out an even more dangerous mission. Parachute airdrop to the enemy's base to open the door. What magic materials are needed to build a Hellgate fortress? How long does it take to cast the spell? Keys made a final struggle. This was an order directly given by the evil Dragon Council and the Batsu Devil. With his strength, he could not resist at all. He could only hope that this mission would not lead to certain death. All bats to camps will raise lowly demons. Those lowly demons are the most important casting materials. As for the preparation time, 12 spellcasters who can use spells of level 3 and above will be divided into 2 groups. They will take turns to use all their spell slots to memorize specific spells and continue casting for 3 days and nights. As Kryphia spoke, she gave Keys the design of the Hellgate Fortress and the scroll of specific spells. 10 days and nights. Keys did not forget the terrifying scene when the demonic army attacked the city. In less than 2 hourglasses of battle, almost half of the mercenaries from other planes in the camp were lost. Moreover, that was only the vanguard of the demon tannery. There was no damage caused by the thousands of demons supporting them. If they entered the abyssal plane behind the enemy lines, the number of demons they might encounter would exceed the limits of what a normal person could imagine. Although the casting materials for this spell did not require the stomach pouch of a golden dragon filled with stones or the pituitary epithelium of a giant Teskara beast, Keys did not seem like a great arcanist who could cast spells of level 40 or above. He could already imagine that if he accepted this mission, his group would be like an airdrop box, provoking wave after wave of demons coming to pick up the airdrops. Kryphia saw Keys' expression turn from shock to despair. She continued, "This mission is not meant to be a suicide mission. This kind of mission isn't to send you to your deaths. In fact, there have been many successful cases of Hell's Gate Fortress in the Blood War. The Bats of Devil's army will hold back most of the forces of that plane for you on the main battlefield. Moreover, more war resources will be ready and will be transported to this camp under your command soon. Also, as a reward for killing the Baylor demon, with the agreement of the Evil Dragon Council, I've brought you something." Kryphia carefully took out a heavy bronze chest from her spatial equipment. She first inputted her secret imprint, then signaled Keys to copy her. "The Evil Dragon Council has decided to invest more in you as your reward. You will obtain the most basic qualifications to enter the abyssal plane and fight." After inputting 2 correct secret imprints for verification, the mechanism on the bronze box automatically operated. The whole box turned into a magic circle that had been engraved with various runes, and the item that was originally hidden in the bronze box was now quietly floating in the center of the magic circle. Chapter 52. It was a golden heart that was still beating. This is the most valuable harvest of the Evil Dragon Council in the past 100 years. A heart that contains all the power of an ancient golden dragon. Although this was a relic of the red dragon race's archenemy, Kryphia could not help but sigh at how lovely the dark golden color was. Just like how the red dragon was the most powerful of the 5-colored megalosaurus, the golden dragon was recognized as the strongest of the kind metallic dragons. These metallic dragons could easily grow to over 80 feet long. If their slender necks were included, the golden dragon of the same age would look even bigger than the red dragon. The old dragons in the council invented this byproduct when they were researching and modifying the descendants of the evil dragons. Kryphia pulled out the greatsword that was embedded in the stone floor and lightly tapped the edge of the magic circle that the bronze box had turned into. You just have to walk up there and activate this magic circle. Then you can begin to fuse with this golden dragon's heart. According to the old dragon speculations, although you can't fully absorb the power of this heart due to your race, it shouldn't be a problem for you to reach the level of a blue dragon in the prime of your life. Keys looked at the golden dragon's heart that was completely bound by 6 magic rune chains and showed a cautious expression. After using his knowledge of magic to identify only a small part of the magic circle and the rune chain's effects, he directly asked, "Are there any side effects of this fusion? Has there ever been a case where the fusion failed?" "Young dragon, I can't answer your question for now. According to the old dragon speculations, the most likely side effect is that your body may have some mutations similar to that of a golden dragon. As for whether there have been cases of failure, if you succeed, then there won't be any. Otherwise, you'll be the first case," Kryphia said indifferently. Of course, Quest yearned for greater strength, but rationally, He rejected this method of gaining strength that didn't rely on learning or training, not to mention using his own body as an experiment to enhance his strength. But in this situation, if he did not accept the joint orders of the evil Dragon Council and the Batsa Devil with the unforgettable name, he could only choose to flee. He did not even know how to leave Avernus. If he chose to accept the orders and did not have a way to strengthen himself in a short period of time, he would die in the hands of the Thanner Reed demons before the demons and Penishade dragons came after him. This was almost certain. The key to breaking out of this situation was to accept the experiment in front of him. After pondering for a moment, Keyes took a deep breath and dispelled his transformation according to Crifia's instructions. Fortunately, the battle staff room was built with such a situation in mind. Quess, who was in his dragon form, wouldn't have to be careful and tear down the place. However, apart from Crifia, everyone else had to leave the room. Otherwise, there wouldn't be enough space. Young dragon, I have to say, you're quite talented. Crifia sized up Keyes in his dragon form. She had previously identified the new commander of this camp as a young blue dragon through hormonal signals. However, she was still a little surprised when she saw the young dragon's body. This kind of emotion rarely appeared in red dragons, who were known for their arrogance. The young blue dragon in front of her had far exceeded the size of an average young blue dragon. He was even more muscular than most young red dragons. This phenomenon of exceeding one's age was only seen in a very small number of Megalosaurus with astonishing potential. Seeing how strong this young dragon was, Crifia changed the auxiliary ritual method that the evil Dragon Council had taught her. Now, let your chest face this magic circle. That's right, that's it. Crifia directed the oversized young blue dragon to walk to a suitable position. 3 of the runic chains that were originally binding the golden dragon's heart suddenly sank into Keyes' chest, as if the layers of thick scales covering it were nothing. It might hurt a little, but according to the old dragons, the more you can stay awake, the better the effect of this ritual will be. You'll also be able to bear more power. Originally, the reason why the evil Dragon Council had sent this God 3 Chinibu Red Dragon Girl was to avoid causing any harm as much as possible. Knock this little guy out. However, after Crifia saw Keyes' physique, she somehow thought that he could endure the slight pain of the ritual with his own physique. Roar! A loud roar came from the young blue dragon's large mouth. The scales all over his body rose slightly due to the contraction of his muscles due to the immense pain. The runic chains that sank into his chest and the magic engraved on the bronze ritual circle worked. The runic chains dragged the golden dragon's heart like a 6-clawed octopus and squeezed it out of the young blue dragon's chest. The magic on the bronze ritual circle not only froze Keyes' struggling body, but also cut off all his roars. Looking at the red dragon Crifia, who was looking at him with great interest, Keyes somehow remembered a crosstalk he had heard a long time ago before he transmigrated. Does it hurt when you get injections? I've had injections for 10 years. Poochie. There's nothing that doesn't hurt. When the bearded nurse in the crosstalk gradually overlapped with the Chinibu red dragon Crifia in front of him, Keyes suddenly felt a slight burning sensation replace the sharp pain of his flesh being torn apart. A faint flame gushed out from the hole where the golden dragon's heart was squeezed out of the young blue dragon's chest. Keyes smelled a burnt protein smell, and another kind of pain gradually replaced the original one. From eating a coal ball to swallowing a sun, the flame was no longer just flowing out from the hole in his chest. The damaged hole had already healed due to the high temperature. From the gaps of every scale to the shameful cloaca, and even the depths of his almond-yellow pupils, the burning flames surged out. Don't worry, the golden dragon is the same as us red dragons, a megalosaurus of the fire attribute. It's just a small flame. When you fully adapt to the benefits of the flame, you will be able to experience the beauty of bathing in magma. This is normal. Seeing Keyes struggling more and more because of the pain, Crifia wanted to comfort the young blue dragon with words, but she could not say the word phenomenon in the end. The flame that erupted from Keyes' body slowly transitioned from the original red-orange to yellow and white, and then quickly turned into a pale blue. Finally, there were even some purple flames. Damn it, why is the temperature of the flame so high? The red dragon, who had just ridiculed him for bathing in magma, now found that the rocky ground under her feet had really turned into magma. Could it be that this overly strong blue dragon really has the ability to absorb all the life essence of the ancient golden dragon? But the temperature of the flame that he is emitting now is close to the limit that only the ancient red dragon can endure. As the temperature increased, the energy contained in the flame would gradually change from the infrared spectrum to the ultraviolet spectrum that was difficult to distinguish with the naked eye, and so the color would gradually change accordingly. Originally, according to the normal ritual setting, the young blue dragon could only absorb less than half of the energy if he wanted to fuse with the golden dragon heart of an ancient dragon. In other words, Keys' strength could only reach the level of a middle-aged dragon. However, the theoretical speculation of the modification experiment did not take into account some special circumstances. As Keys was directly inherited with the ability to adapt when he was in the dragon egg, the golden dragon heart triggered the body to begin a passive evolution. His body instinctively simulated a better way to use this power. I have to think of a way. If this goes on, I will become a dragon-shaped torch. Keys could feel that every cell in his body was in the process of evolution, from his internal organs to his skin trying to adapt to the high temperature, but there was still no way to effectively control this energy. Under the stimulation of the flame, the electric charges that the blue dragon had stored in various parts of his body also went berserk. Electric arcs accompanied by the high-temperature flame formed a terrifying energy web filled with a sense of destruction on the surface of Keys' body. However, this phenomenon inspired the young blue dragon who was struggling to think of a solution. Electromagnetic confinement and Tumac magnetic confinement. In any case, Keys still had the memory of studying science and engineering. He had a preliminary countermeasure in his mind. After trying to use his racial talent for electromagnetic control several times, he finally simulated the electromagnetic confinement field that densely covered every cell. The energy released by the flame was finally restrained in Keys' body. Kryphia stood on the magma that was gradually beginning to solidify, looking at her own kind that had completely turned into a pitch-black charcoal sculpture because their bodies had been burned to ashes. Did the fusion fail? That shouldn't be. According to those old dragons, the success rate should be very high. The charcoal sculpture suddenly moved. The two hearts trembled together, shaking off the black debris on the surface of Keys' body. Amidst the rustling sounds, the young blue dragon opened his eyes. His scarab blinked. His eyes that were like molten gold flashed for an instant, revealing the moment when lightning and flame resonated. Chapter 53. What did Keys gain from fusing with a golden dragon's heart? Higher racial potential, stronger physical strength, golden dragon's underwater breathing and medical talents, as well as his control over fire and his near immunity to fire. After his dragon body was melted by the high-temperature flames that broke out of his body, a large amount of burnt ash fell off. This caused Quess, a young blue dragon with an extraordinary physique, to lose a lot of weight. That Chinibu red dragon is finally gone. Keys chewed on the devil pepper snack that Ogre Brew had prepared for him. Now he could confidently ask all creatures who else is there when it came to eating spicy food. He carefully studied the remains of the bronze array that was chiseled out from the cooling lava. After sending off the Chinibu red dragon Old Auntie, the blue dragon, who had transformed back into a young human, and his companions entered a more intense battle preparations. The bronze plate, which was the carrier of the ritual array, was protected by the magic effect and did not melt into liquid copper. Although the array function on it was no longer effective, the portable array technology still gave Keys, who was determined to become a top spellcaster, a lot of inspiration. Every day, the Blue Dragon youth used the training method recorded in the small booklet he traded with the Yugro's Judgment Fiend to train his martial arts. Apart from studying the physiology of demons with the ogre which Dr. Paulu, he also took out a considerable amount of time to ponder over the enchantment process of this portable magic circle. This arrangement of time meant that he had to greatly reduce the time he had to manage the camp's administrative work. Because of the airdrop battle mission, the demon's logistics department continued to fill the remote camp with more war resources and mercenaries from different planes. Fortunately, Ogre Brew, who always had an idea, stood up and helped Keys share the administrative burden. Brew seemed to be very talented in this area. He grafted the methods and experience of cooking to the management of the camp. Just like how he managed the ingredients in the gourmet boxes, he arranged the various materials that were transported to the camp into various warehouses. This ensured the safety of the storage and made it convenient to distribute during battles. The mercenaries who had spontaneously gathered together according to their different planar origins were separated by him. They were rearranged to different gathering places according to their different types of soldiers and abilities. In order to ensure that his orders were carried out and eliminate the possibility of chaos in the camp. Under Keys' instructions, the higher-ups of the Batsu sent a total of 100 bone demons and divided them into 20 small teams. They led more barbed demon guards to form a military police team named after Brew's beloved weapon, the whaling harpoon. They were responsible for patrolling and resolving various disputes in the camp. Keys' authority as a commander knew the true names of all the bone demons in the military police team. Under the restriction of the power of the true name, this military police team, which consisted entirely of mid-level Batsa demons as the backbone, could and must completely carry out the arrangements of their manager, the Ogre Blue. Under the Ogre's arrangements, everything in the camp started to become orderly. Order and rules were quickly established in this large camp made up of tens of thousands of mercenaries from other planes. The power brought about by order was immense. Without expending much resources and manpower, they easily annihilated a few small abyssal demon armies that had recently snuck in to launch an attack. This concept was widely acknowledged by the garrison in the camp. The field medical camp that appeared in the following few battles managed to save many otherworldly mercenaries who had been injured in battle with the demons and did not have the powerful recovery abilities of the demons of the lower realms. They could only wait for death, and this system gained the support of most of the soldiers in the camp. It was good to have order. Broombrow's Dalton also agreed with this point of view. He was arranged to be in a vanguard team made up of barbarian fighters. Unfortunately, he was not the leader. Instead, it was a more robust Tauren warrior with half Inferno bloodline. Fortunately, most of his subordinates were also assigned here, so their leader would not be a commander without an army. Dalton did not have any objections to this arrangement. In fact, he appreciated the orderly management style. If the leader of the garrison in Soft Maple City was half as good as the manager here, there wouldn't be so many small gangs popping up all the time and messing up the city. I have to take my brothers everywhere and work as unpaid security guards. His words made the former Broombrow's subordinates agree with him deeply. However, this sense of recognition was more prevalent among Dalton's old brothers. Some of the new and untested subordinates did not even have the most basic loyalty, let alone teamwork. For example, the Seronian villains who had joined Dalton previously refused to listen to Broombrow's orders. Instead, they gathered under another powerful leader in the vanguard team. According to them, they had found the home of their faith. Dalton scoffed at this. A bunch of disloyal and reckless cultist scum. On the small drill ground of the stormtroopers, Dalton sat on a barrel of ale covered with a hemp-woven bag. He and some of his brothers around him watched coldly as the new boss, who was regarded as the home of faith by the Seronians, stood on a podium made of stacked lath and wooden boxes and preached the strange doctrines he believed in Inferno, which he was not very proficient in yet. The new leader of the Seronians had a coyote-like head and dark brown fur with red spots. Sporadic iron rings pierced the surface of his bare chest as decoration. Even when he was giving a speech, he was accompanied by two salivating hyenas. This was a cruel and ferocious gnoll. At the same time, he was also a gnoll priest who believed in an evil god. Praise the great Yinagu. Your people with poisonous fangs will listen to your teachings. The flesh and blood of the weak will be offered, and we will share your glory. Following the words of the Knoll priest, several humanoid creatures with broken limbs were brought over by his subordinates. These were the victims of the evil ritual they were about to hold. The sources of these victims were either unlucky warriors who came to this foreign mercenary camp alone and were not very strong, or the wounded were stolen from the new medical camp established by Blue the Ogre. The weak do not deserve to live. In the feast of flesh and blood, we offer our most sincere offerings. A group of people who listened to the teachings of the Knoll priest began to beat the victims who fell to the ground. What's more, a few deer-headed Seronians who liked to eat raw meat began to tear some flesh from the victims with their powerful big hands and stuffed it into their mouths and chewed. Under the blessing of the spell effect of the Knoll priest from the evil god he believed in, these victims who had been divided and eaten could not make any sound, not even the slightest wail. As for stopping this evil, please, this was the bloody camp of Bator. How could the creatures who participated in this cruel war have any mercy? It was normal for him to not care about anything that had nothing to do with him. At most, when they felt a little disgusted, they would not look at it. "Boss, it's done." One of Dalton's lackeys ran over from afar. At the sight of the bloody and cruel scene, he was so scared that he shivered all over as he turned around and whispered in his boss's ear. After that, he hurriedly covered his mouth. He was afraid that he would vomit. Dalton gently patted the trembling subordinate as if to blame this timid behavior. "Little boy, what's there to be afraid of? This is hell, the lair of the devils." As if to confirm the statement of the devil's lair, Dalton had just finished speaking. 6 bone demons directly appeared on the small drill ground belonging to the assault team with a high-level teleportation spell. There was no declaration of guilt or any other nonsense. These bats of devil, who looked like undead creatures, launched a punishment operation, but their method was simpler and more violent, only slaughter. In order to improve the efficiency of the operation, the bone demons first used ice wall together to imprison the cultists who wanted to escape in a cage made of solid ice a few feet thick. Then, it was as if nothing happened. They went through the ice wall and began their work. Through the ice wall, the assault team, who did not participate in the cult gathering, could clearly see that the bone demons frequently waved their long-handled scythes and occasionally used their poisonous tails like poisonous scorpions to poke the villains who were still enjoying the feast of flesh and blood. Under the influence of the bone demons' ferocious attacks and their talent, divine light of fear, all the cultists who were originally feasting on flesh and blood fled desperately. But the ice wall around them, which had no blind spots, trapped them together with the terrible Batsa devil. It was useless to try their best. There was nowhere to escape. The Knoll priest, who had organized the gathering and believed in the evil god, did not escape death either. He and his pet hyena were impaled by the tail of the same bone demon, and the powerful poison harvested the Knoll's life in just a moment. Dalton patted his subordinate who had just returned from the report and was still in a state of shock. He rarely comforted him. "What's the use of being afraid? I've already told you that these cultists deserve to die. How dare they believe in demons and evil gods in the devil's territory? Ignorant fools. Aren't they courting death?" Mr. Dalton, Broombrows, had changed from an ignorant country bumpkin to a bloody veteran with some knowledge of the lower plains. This was another arrangement of Brew, who always had an idea. The ogres would select a warrior of a certain level of strength from every camp to act as their eyes, ears, and mouthpiece to monitor the situation from the shadows. Order brought power, and the double order of light and darkness brought twice the power. Note 1. Bone demons, also known as Ocelith. In D&D's settings, these Batsu demons that look like undead creatures are the supervisors of the 9 hells driven by hatred, greed, and jealousy. They are also the selectable composition of the supervisory team and the military police. They stand about 9 feet tall, about 3 meters, and weigh about 500 pounds, about 450 pounds. They belong to the middle class of Batsa devils. The abilities here are the 3rd version of the ability settings. Chapter 54. The Pillar of Skulls standing on the Avernus Plains had recently harvested even more nourishment. As the large-scale blood war was imminent, Demon Tana generously sent out a large number of human heads in military operations, allowing this huge world tree to grow much faster. At this moment, the evil dragon court, sitting in the deep pit at the roots of this thriving world tree, was bustling with activity. The large teleportation gate connected to the main battlefield of the Blood War, the Grey Wilderness, had been established. However, in this battle, the main battlefield connected to the Grey Wilderness was only used as a distraction. Meanwhile, the true core of the plan had been deployed. The 100 military fortresses that had proven their worth in the previous battle against the Demon Vanguard were now filled with all kinds of Batsid Devil and Dragon descendants. They would serve as the vanguard army in the upcoming planar infiltration. They would set up many Hellgate fortresses in the target of this bloody battle. The 473rd level of the Abyss, the Acid Fog Canyon. According to the calculations of the ancient and even ancient Evil Dragon members of the Evil Dragon Council, as well as the professionals from the Strategic Attack and Logistics Administration of the first layer of Bator, as long as more than 10 Hellgate fortresses were built, the Dragon Queen and Bator would have a 90% chance of winning this blood war. At this moment, the legendary blue dragon Sirota, who dominated the Ash Plain, was only one of the several hundred legendary Megalosaurus standing in the Hall of Dragons. There were plenty of Penishade Megalosaurus that were older and stronger than him in this unusually spacious hall. The ancestor of all the Penishade Megalosaurus bloodlines, the king they all worshipped, and the god the evil dragons worshipped in name, Penishade Dragon Queen Tiamat, was quietly crouching in the deepest part of the hall. Of course, this was only a clone of the Dragon Queen, but the size of this clone alone was larger than all the dragons present. Even the strongest primordial red dragon, standing at the side, was only 1/5 the size of the Dragon Queen's gigantic body that was close to 5,000 meters in size. However, this clone of the Dragon Queen was too lazy to move. She felt tired. Only with all the divine power of this clone could she move Avernus closer to the trajectory of the 473rd layer of the Abyss. This was even after the Evil Dragon Council and the Barth high-ranking researchers had jointly developed a super-large magic circle that had the effect of amplifying divine power. Otherwise, just the act of pushing the plane would have directly caused the Dragon Queen's avatar to collapse. Perseverance would eventually pay off. After a long period of hard work, those who were qualified to stand in the Hall of Dragons felt a slight change in the laws of the laws. The first layer of Bator, Avernus, had arrived at its predicted location. The laws of the Abyss began to affect the Blood War Abyss. Everyone attack. The clone of the Dragon Queen in the deepest part of the Hall of Dragons suddenly opened all 10 of her half-closed eyes. Her 5 heads roared in unison as she gave the order to attack. In the Bronze Fortress, which was protected by 13 layers of walls, the current lord of the first layer of Bator, Bayer, was sitting on an iron throne made of sharp blades. He was sipping on a golden cup that contained a highly poisonous liquor called Gughalakai, brewed from the venom of the purgatory centipede. After hearing the dragon's roar that contained divine power, this strong devil lord covered in dark red scales excitedly gulped down the strong liquor in his hand. He didn't seem to care that his saliva had corroded the golden goblet to the side. Finally, the curtain of a new round of bloody battle is about to open. Pass down the order. The Batsu army of Avernus will quickly pass through the portal and arrive at the Grey Wilderness. Fight. To slaughter. Conquer. Burp. A pit fiend acting as Bayer's messenger forced himself to ignore the terrifying screams of the 12 angelic skulls hanging from his master's waist, using a secret technique to keep them alive. He used the fastest speed he could muster to pass on the order. Keys, who was in a remote area, received the order even faster than the devils of the Batsu. The moment the clone of the Dragon Queen let out a furious roar, the Penishade Megalosaurus and other dragonkin in Avernus also heard the dragon's roar that contained the power of the evil dragon. The ritual magic structure, which had long been buried by the Strategic Defense Attack and Logistic Security Administration of Bader's first-level territory in the mercenary camp under Kith's jurisdiction in the name of transporting supplies, was immediately activated. Interdimensional Precise Teleportation Anchor was a spell that had been specially developed. It completely covered the land within a radius of nearly 1,000 feet, with the entire camp as the center. Under the effects of the planar spell, the entire camp, along with the land covered by the spell, was teleported to the precise location marked by the demon spies. Only a deep crater was left in the vast plains of Avernus. This style of operation is indeed demonic. This was the umpteenth time Quest had sighed with the same heartfelt exclamation ever since he came to Bardo. He doesn't even have the slightest chance to go back on his word. He's sent straight to the plane. Perhaps he had made sufficient preparations beforehand, but the interplanar teleportation only lasted for a short while before Keyes sensed that he had arrived at his destination. He tidied up his new equipment. He put on the matte mithril enchanted half-armor that had been treated with black fragments from his spontaneous combustion. He loaded the modified, double-barreled antique whaling shotgun, which had been loaded with a lot of new bullets. He sorted out the different types of goblin bombs and placed them in a small pouch made of Baylor leather at his waist. He confirmed the status of the railgun ammunition in the newly purchased space ring and the space belt he had bought from Ricknass. He pulled out the heavy sickle-edged executioner's sword that the ogre blacksmith Neru had forged from adamantine. After several days of research on the portable bronze ritual, Keyes walked out of the command room that had turned into a lava cavern. He climbed up the walls of the camp that had been turned into a fortress. After greeting the 3 ogre brothers and the 2 goblin golem duo, the blue dragon teenager immersed himself in analyzing the current situation. They really know how to pick a place. The camp had been teleported to the center of a miniature basin. It was originally covered by a large area of mushroom plants. The beacon that Batsuit Devil spies had set up here in the early stages was indeed difficult to be discovered by the Thanner Re-Demons due to the many obstructions. However, when Keyes' mercenary camp, no, it should now be called the Mercenary Fortress, was airdropped here through interplanar teleportation, the mushroom forest that was originally used as a cover had become the foundation at the bottom of the fortress. The massive fortress almost completely covered the bottom of the miniature basin. Half of the 3rd layer of fortifications that had been built outside the mercenary camp was embedded in the steep slope at the edge of the basin. This way, the compound formation that could have increased the defensive effect had lost most of its defensive effects. On the other hand, Thanner Ree's army could launch a diving attack from the slope of the basin. We can only fight for a while. Hopefully, our previous arrangements will be effective. Before Keyes could think of a strategy to use to make up for the massive hole in their defenses, the Thanner Reed demons that had been patrolling the basin began to launch sporadic attacks on the fortress. Unlike the demon vanguard that they had encountered in Avernus, the first demons that the blue dragon teenager saw while leaning on the battlements were not the infamous weaklings like the Dretches and Quasits that were commonly seen in the bottomless abyss. A few groups of Bugala demons that lived on the slopes and in the mushroom forest at the bottom of the basin were the first to sense the aura of order that belonged to Bator. These demons with higher perception seemed to have noticed the red smoke rising from the airdrop boxes. They climbed or leaped from their original habitat towards the fortress and swept over. The souls that fell into the abyss and became Bugala demons were mostly thugs and hooligans that believed in violence above all else. Their demon form showed even more of their barbaric and brutal nature. The Bugala demons had a terrifying face, a huge gorilla with a collapsed face and fangs. Their body shape was a classic example of 8 feet tall and 8 feet in circumference. Without the ability to fly, they could only walk on land. But when they climbed between the vines of the mountains and jungles, they had unexpected speed and agility. And these demons were different from most of the Thanner Re-Demons. They were particularly suited to cooperate with their own kind and fight the enemy together. At this time, the Bugala demons on the slopes at the edge of the basin took advantage of their height and constantly grabbed any stones that could be lifted from the rock walls and threw them to harass the defenders who had already lined up on the wall. Even though the smaller rocks were better than nothing, the defenders still had to be careful to avoid some of the millstone-sized rocks that were occasionally thrown, which caused them to be somewhat troublesome. On the other side, the Bugala demons that attacked at the same time took advantage of the harassment of their own kind on the hillside to quickly weave some simple climbing tools with vines. At the same time, they also pulled out some mushroom-like plants with umbrella-shaped caps and used them as shields on their heads. They then launched an attack on the defenders who had just finished lining up on the third layer of the outer wall of the fortress. The silverback, gorilla-like demon's teamwork was rather perfect. This surprised the current commander of the mercenary fortress, Keys. However, this dessert-before-the-meal attack was not enough to shake the war machines inherited from the 9 prisons of Bader. First, the barbed crossbowmen in the fortress were on standby. After a barrage of hellish bolts, they basically wiped out the Bugala demons that had launched a feint attack on the hillside. Then, on the other side, the Bugala demons that were attacking the city like ants were about to jump over the city wall with their mushroom umbrellas as shields. But all of them were ignited by the spray of atomized fuel and electric ignition devices that were spurting out from inside the city wall. This move came from the creation of the great goblin engineer and mechanical expert, Ricknaz. It was simply done by burying hydraulic fuel pipes and nozzles. With the help of several spellcasters, it did not take up any spell slots to cast the level 0 spell Tremor Shock. This created an effect that was not inferior to the level 8 evocation spell Burning Cloud. It was just that it was not convenient to move freely, but this was not a problem for the defenders. As for the Bugala gorillas that were struggling in the flames, they were easily killed by the spears and arrows of the defenders. Only a few Bugala demons were lucky enough to escape and hide in the depths of the mushroom forest. Chapter 55. The 3,450 first experiment has failed. The reason for the failure is unknown, but it has been proven that using the phylactery reincarnation method is unable to escape from the parasitic acid mistworm. Damn worm! After completing the summary and analysis of the experiment in the spell book, Sneyd Benra, who had already transformed into a lich, habitually added this summary curse. Sneyd Benra was the eldest son of the former matriarch of the first family of the Drow elves in Morseblight City in the Underdark. When his life was about to end, this drow mage drank a special potion mixed with venom and the blood of sacrifices. After a magic ritual, he successfully transformed himself into an undead creature that lived in another form, a lich. Whether it was before or after his death, even in a race like the drow where women's rights were paramount. After being immersed in the path of magic for many years, he was always able to provide a way of life for himself. However, this wonderful time was gone after a trip to a foreign land for teaching. The demon lord of the 473rd layer of the abyss, the tyrant worm, after tricking thousands of powerful spellcasters for his learning. In order to recoup his previous investment, he bestowed almost all of his teachers with the glory of being one with the noble demon lord. Goddess Lolth blessed him. Sneyd Benra was neither the demon lord's favorite meal, all kinds of powerful true dragons, nor was he an investment target that needed to be recouped, such as some Netherese survivors. A lich had no meat on his body. He was so thin that he was just skin and bones. Other than the crunch, there was no taste of chicken. He was lucky enough to escape the fate of being devoured, but unfortunately, the tyrant worm used some of his flesh and blood on the spot to turn him into parasitic acid mistworms. He was also arranged to look after a small part of the demon lord's huge territory as a shepherd dog to look after the parasitic lambs of the other Thanner re-demons. Of course, Lich Sneyd wanted to escape, but being parasitized by the demon lord who ruled the Acid Mist Canyon was equivalent to being firmly bound to this layer of the plane. No matter if he used a teleportation spell or used the ferry boat of the Nether River Soul Demon to smuggle himself out, as long as he still had parasitic acid mistworms on him, he would be immediately teleported back once he left this plane. Without exception, there was no way to escape. After many fruitless attempts, the Lich began to search for a way to deal with this parasite, using his own knowledge. However, as the tyrant worm tyrant's first-generation flesh and blood clones, these parasites had all sorts of incredible abilities. Regardless of whether it was physically extracted or self-destructed by various evocation spells. It was as if there was a hidden worm nest in the Lich's body. Every time the Lich was dealt with, the worms would immediately reappear. All kinds of experiments have been going on for hundreds of years, and the Lich had already tried thousands of experiments. Fortunately, he had already turned into an undead creature. Otherwise, just focusing on the same problem for such a long period of time could drive ordinary creatures crazy. In the latest experiment, Lich Snade carefully controlled the field spell to grind his entire body into powder. Then he used the preset disintegration magic array to turn the powder into nothingness. However, after the self-destruction, Snade, who had consumed the soul energy stored in his phylactery, found that those damn parasites had reappeared with him. Damn it, could it be that these bugs are bound to my soul? After recording the summary of the experiment, the Lich began to put on his dark red robe that had become wrinkled due to the lack of time to take care of it for hundreds of years. But suddenly, his hands paused in the middle of putting on his clothes. He began to quickly flip through the previous experiment records. The essence of the Thanner Reed demons was a fallen soul under the influence of the law of chaos. Therefore, their souls and bodies were unified, and even the demon lord was no exception. Therefore, it could really be like this. I used to think that these things didn't have intelligence and shouldn't have souls. Therefore, I used all kinds of methods to destroy these parasites. Even if I used the phylactery to reincarnate, there was no way to get rid of these maggots. That's right. It must be like this. Thinking of the hope of escaping from the demon lord, the two soul flames in the Lich's eye sockets burned more vigorously. He hurriedly copied this conjecture and the theoretical basis in his spell book, and he didn't even stop to exclaim. Just when the invigorated Snade was about to immediately start a new experiment design. The communication array inlaid on the wall of the underground secret laboratory cum storage room had a commotion. Master Snade, something bad has happened. What happened? Didn't I say not to disturb me when I'm doing my research? Even the dullest creatures could feel the strong dissatisfaction in the Lich's empty voice. Standing on the other side of the communication array was Snade's gargoyle butler. Master, something happened in the Shuanlin Basin. Those ape demons were attacked by suspected demons. Feeling his master's dissatisfaction, the gargoyle quickly stated the facts in concise and comprehensive words. Batsu's attack? Following the words in the communication array, the Lich directly appeared in front of the gargoyle. This is the 473rd floor of the abyss. Have the demons already pushed the bloody war here? Master, I brought those ape demons for you to identify. The gargoyle carefully organized his words. When Snade saw a few Bagoo demons who were burned like skinned monkeys being dragged into the stone room by a few gargoyles, he directly cast a spell to deprive the souls of these demons. Sure enough, the souls and bodies of lower creatures like demons are one. Seeing the bodies of the Bagoo demons being deprived of their souls and immediately turning into a pool of green foam, the Lich was even more convinced of his previous conjecture. After playing with the souls of these Bagoo demons for a while, he figured out what had happened to them. Snade grabbed a squirming acid mist worm from his body and fiercely stuffed it into his mouth to chew carefully, as if he wanted to use his lost taste to taste the flesh again. Gargoyle, gather those Tana Re that are used to raise worms. Tell them that the bloody war has spread here and that the demons are around. After saying that, he threw a few Bagoo demons' soul flames that were jumping on his fingertips into the body of a skeleton soldier that was wandering in the stone room. Demonic possession. Fusing the soul of a demon or demon from the lower realm into an undead creature spell. If successful, the undead creature would obtain the corresponding power of a creature from the lower realm. However, there were few precedents of putting a few souls into an undead creature's body. Generally, spellcasters would not choose weak undead creatures like skeleton soldiers as the host of demonic souls. Oh, the experiment seems to be a success. Seeing that more heads grew on the skeleton soldier's body after being parasitized by several demon souls, the drow lich Snade burst into a rare wild laughter under the gargoyle butler's puzzled gaze. "Ah, soul, demon soul, let me see how to cleanse this parasitism." Perhaps this master has really been driven mad by his own research. The gargoyle butler suddenly had this thought, but immediately suppressed it carefully. After all, the mad lich was also a lich, and perhaps even more terrifying. Chapter 56. When my best friend number 21 and I first set foot on the land of the bottomless abyss, the welcoming ceremony was held by some rather comical-looking monkeys. Number 21 insisted on calling them King Kong. Commander Keyes later told us that they were actually a type of Thanner, re-demon, called Bugala. Just as I finished setting up the prototype robot and prepared to deal with the demon army that was about to swarm us, a voice suddenly rang out. "A strange-looking undead creature has appeared in my scope. Report of the bloody battle of Riknaz frontline. Arbis Volume." Chapter 11. After defeating the attack of the Bugala demons, Keyes stood on the walls of his airdropped fortress and waited for more demons to arrive. All the mercenaries in the fortress, even the reserve teams arranged to wait in ambush in the cave, were on high alert, ready to attack at any time. According to Brew's arrangements, there were veterans in each squad who had participated in the battle in Avernus. These veterans naturally told the newcomers about the grim situation of the battle with the devils. Every archer was checking their crossbows and arrows. Every warrior tied the leather straps on their armor again and again, repeatedly making sure that the weapons in their hands were sharp and sturdy enough. Anyone who had the ability to cast spells, be it mages, warlocks, priests, druids, forest rangers, etc., were all silently reciting the incantations that they had prepared beforehand, seizing every moment to revise. It was busy and tense, yet orderly. The one who broke the silence before the great battle was a strange undead creature with 3 ape heads and 6 arms. Xiaolong, no, Commander, may I ask if you're the 3rd child in your family?" The mechanical warrior, who had been silent since the start of the battle, moved closer to Keyes and asked softly. "First, all the blue dragon hatched in the same batch were born at the same time, so there was no sibling ranking. Second, the place where I was born was very far from the sea, and there was no place called Chintang Pass nearby." Keyes answered without turning his head. "That's good." Although the 3 ogre brothers and Riknaz still couldn't understand these words, they were happy to see that someone finally caught up with number 21's strange thought process. It could be said that it was an integrated circuit. The guards on the periphery didn't know what the higher-ups of the fortress were thinking at this moment. They were still very careful when dealing with undead creatures standing outside the shooting range. Perhaps this strange undead creature was some kind of rare demon. "Old bull, be careful later. I heard from the people above that this place is actually the lair of a worm-like demon. That fellow is obviously not." As the vanguard, Broom browsed Dalton and his brothers were arranged to wait in the cave. Due to his excellent eyesight, he had already seen what the enemy looked like through the observation holes on the city walls. Thus, he carefully reminded the Tauren beside him, who was the leader of the assault team. After a few days of contact, Dalton knew that this boar was too impulsive. "I already know," the Tauren replied, smoothly on the surface. At this moment, the undead creature with 3 heads and 6 arms was standing alone outside the shooting range of the fortress's crossbow. If they didn't use cannons or spellcasters, the defenders would have no way to effectively attack it from such a long distance. This was the half-undead, half-demon creature that Lich Snade had casually created by injecting the souls of several Bugala demons into the bodies of skeleton soldiers. Although it had the skulls of 3 ape demons, it didn't have much intelligence in essence. The reason why it could stay shrewdly outside the long-range attack range was that there was an evil drows manipulating its actions behind the scenes. The war between the drows was usually similar to a ritualistic religious activity. When the war started, There would be voluntary or involuntary elite warriors who would demonstrate in front of the enemy's formation and attract their attention. The real war began when the masters of martial arts who obeyed the command of the drows stabbed the enemy's throat from the darkness with daggers, and when the slave army quietly surrounded and launched a sudden attack from all corners. Even after becoming a lich, Sneyd was still used to following the fine traditions of his original race. When the defenders saw the undead with 3 heads and 6 arms charging, the real enemy appeared from the ground and the sky at the same time that they didn't pay attention to. A large area of the ground between the 3rd and 2nd layer of defense walls suddenly collapsed, and a large number of undead creatures and Tana, re-demons, formed a huge hole in the ground. In the sky, the Vrox and a large number of gargoyles gathered above the fortress under the cover of the sulfuric acid clouds from the volcanic eruption. After the ground attack began, they immediately folded their wings and quickly cut into the battlefield from the sky at an angle that was close to perpendicular to the ground. A pincer attack from above and below, a 3-dimensional attack, was the tactic that the drows who lived in the caves of the Underdark were used to. During the construction of the fortress defensive position, considering the possibility of being attacked from underground, the spellcaster troops were specially mobilized to use mud to rock and other spells to reinforce the foundation. However, due to the problem of construction time, the construction between the 2nd and 3rd layer of the defensive circle had not been completed, so the attack from underground broke out here. Archers prioritize attacking the targets in the air. Cannons guard against other demon armies that may appear outside the fortress. As the commander of the fortress, Keyes promptly adjusted the battle arrangements. The aerial attacks initially caused a lot of trouble for the defenders on the ground, but as the barbed crossbowmen's foot crossbows began to rain arrows on the Vrox and gargoyles, the Vrox and gargoyles either hurriedly flew to higher ground to avoid the attacks or landed to fight the defenders on the ground. Broom Brows still maintained his cautious battle style. Although he fought with all his might after killing his way out of the cave, he didn't take the initiative to leap out of the formation. On the other hand, the other vanguards, especially the Tauren captain whom he rarely reminded out of kindness, were mostly in a killing frenzy. After twisting off the head of zombie or something else that pounced on him, Dalton glanced at the Tauren who was wrestling with a strange undead creature with 3 heads and 6 arms. I'm afraid that after this battle, we'll have to change captains again. I hope this suicidal mission doesn't fall on my head. But according to the actual situation, his worries were unnecessary. The undead creature that was similar to Neza didn't have the ability to overturn the sea like a child. Even with the souls of several Bugala demons infused into its body, this modified undead creature could only rely on brute force to attack. While the defenders were distracted, it was able to successfully jump over the wall and jump into the battle, but it didn't expect to encounter the Tauren barbarian who relied on brute force to survive. In the blink of an eye, the Tauren barbarian was overthrown. The Tauren wielded a giant axe and flew up and down, chopping the newborn undead into pieces as if he was cutting vegetables. The Tauren barbarian stomped heavily on the skull fragments and pressed them deep into the ground that was airdropped by Bateau. That's all. As if he felt that the opponent was too weak, the Tauren captain stretched his arms and adjusted the posture of the battle axe that was almost the same size as him. Then, he plunged into the depths of the army of undead and demons. This was what a vanguard should do. It didn't matter if he was in the mood to kill, but it made Broom Brows, who wanted to slack off, suffer. Like a fired arrow, the entire vanguard followed the Tauren captain as the arrowhead, and Dalton, who was in the middle of the formation, was swept into the core of the battle. The demons were fearless, and the undead army was fearless. The combination of the two made these monsters a combination that could be said to be unbeatable by all the armies of other material planes. But in the face of the Batsu Devil's machine-like precision and efficient war technology, this combination was not so invincible. Teams of barbed demon sword shield soldiers not only resisted the invaders that spread out from the entrance of the cave, but also tightly surrounded the battle. It was as if they had formed an iron bucket and the invaders were poured into the bucket as if they were water. Several vanguard teams, like Dalton's team, formed by mercenaries from other planes, plunged into the bucket that was filled with water. Like loaches, they kept churning and killing the invaders. Roar! The one who let out this roar of anger and pain was the leader of the vanguard. He had just chopped off his opponent's head when his arm, which was holding the axe, was pierced through by a Sill demon's halberd. The Sill demon was a humanoid demon with a goat's head. Although its body was skinny, it was full of muscles. The Sill demon's sneak attack directly pierced through the torn steel arm guard, causing serious piercing damage. These demons always habitually gnawed on their weapons, so the halberd was covered with the demon's diseased saliva. Although the Tauren, who was stabbed and went crazy, killed the attacker with a backhand, a large number of gray rashes still appeared on his body. "Be careful," Dalton loudly reminded the surrounding soldiers to not get close to the vanguard captain who might be infected with the disease. At the same time, he carefully put on his disease-isolating mask. The infected Tauren quickly weakened and could only support his body with his axe on the ground, but it did not seem to have much effect. When he fell to the ground, some parasite-like worms emerged from the bodies of the killed demons. Suddenly, they gathered from all directions, as if they were anxious to share this fresh body with him. But more undead and demons surged over, blocking Dalton's vision. He could only see a small part of them. Chapter 57. Do you know what dark meat is? It's the flesh of the dead, isn't it, my powerful master? The gargoyle butler of Lich Sneyd stood at the side, looking straight ahead at the ritual array that his master was preparing. However, his ears were constantly listening to the conversation between his master and the newly summoned Quasit. To him, this Quasit was a threat, a guy who might threaten his position as a butler. Sometimes, he really didn't understand what his master was thinking. What could a weak Quasit do? How could such a weak guy, who didn't seem like a demon, help a powerful lich who could easily beat up most spellcasters? That kind of trash was only needed by rookies who had just started to learn magic. Even a slightly more outstanding apprentice would have a better choice. 100 words are better than a single silence. This was a necessary quality to be a butler of a lich. Those who talked too much in front of the lich master wouldn't live long. The gargoyle butler cursed viciously in his heart, but his ears didn't stop for a moment. It seems that you are quite knowledgeable. As a demon of Tanna-Ri, this is rare, the lich said casually as he flipped through the spellbook. Thank you for your compliment. To serve a wise and powerful spellcaster like you, this is a must. Ha ha, said the Quasit cautiously. After folding his spellbook, Lich Sneyd walked to the front of the ritual circle and checked all the runes and materials. Not far away, there was a huge hole exposed on the surface of the ground. Under the supervision of the Lich's living armor construct bodyguards, hundreds of undead creatures were continuously transporting the severed limbs of various creatures out of the hole and piling them up at the designated location of the ritual array. The source of these severed limbs were mostly the soldiers from the material plane who were attacked by the demon and undead army in the distance. The rest were the remains of some demons and low-level demons after being killed. These were all experimental materials that the Lich was about to use. Do you still remember the dark meat that I mentioned just now? The Lich asked the small magic pet hovering behind him without turning his head. Of course, my powerful master. Those things are the materials for your secret weapon, right? The Quasit had learned some knowledge about spell casting from its former masters who had been lured into the abyss by it, so it wanted to show off its worth in front of this terrifying Lich. What a smart little guy. He is indeed a secret weapon, a very powerful one. Sneyd seemed to be in a good mood. Liches were experts in creating all kinds of undead creatures. The magic circle in front of them was a heart-shaped magic circle that Sneyd had created after combining the secret magic of creating Soul Catcher and Grave Demon. The Soul Catcher's ability was to absorb other people's souls and imprison them in its own body. The evil secret technique used to create it required absorbing a large amount of souls. The Grave Corpse Demon's innate ability was to take the bodies of other creatures and mix them into its bloated body made of filthy soil and various corpses. Creating it required a large amount of dark flesh. The demons in the lower world, whether it was the Thanner Reet demon or the Batsid devil, had the same flesh and soul. Therefore, their dead bodies could meet the requirements for creating the soul catcher. As for the grave corpse demon, a monster that required a large amount of fresh dead bodies and not souls to be created, most of the time, it could only be found in the material plane. Fortunately, there were a large number of mercenaries from the material plane in the demonic fortress. After they died in battle, they became the best source of precious materials that Lich Snade could not obtain when he was trapped in this level of the abyss. However, to create these two types of undead creatures, a special guide was needed before the ritual began. An evil and helpless creature was needed as a primer to awaken the monsters. Poof! The bodyguard under Snade's control, who was wearing horror armor, directly pulled out his sword and stabbed the Quasit in the heart after supervising the undead creatures in a magic circle. For the secret weapon, what creature was more evil than a demon? What demon was weaker than a Quasit? This newly summoned pet was the best primer for the ritual. When everything was ready, the Lich ignored the Quasit who was still alive, begging for mercy or cursing. He stabbed the sword with the evil pet into the center of the magic circle. The ritual began. At this moment, all the undead creatures with a bit of intelligence were trying their best to stay away from this extremely evil ritual circle. However, the initiator of this evil, Lich Snade, was standing straight in the center of the circle like an old monk in meditation. He silently endured the pain caused by the magic circle's double deprivation of body and soul. Even the body of a lich that did not feel pain was not immune to this kind of pain. The 3,452nd experiment. The lich muttered in his heart. This was Snade's real plan. He wanted to use this method of depriving the soul and body to get rid of the parasitic acid mistworms in his body. No, it was the maggots that were born from the flesh of the demon Lord Worm Tyrant. The lich's immortality came from his phylactery. As long as the phylactery that stored his real life was not destroyed, the lich could not be completely killed. No matter if the body was crushed to pieces by axes or his soul was torn to pieces, he could walk out of the phylactery intact after a few days. Snade's consciousness gradually dissipated, but the excitement in his heart became more and more difficult to suppress. This was the closest he had been to successfully escaping from the cage that had imprisoned him for 300 years. The lich seemed to feel that freedom was waving to him. Because of the deprivation of his soul, he only had a little bit of intelligence left. At this time, he was fantasizing about how he could make up for the lost time in the future. So he is an incurable lich. Why is a lich incurable? What is incurable? Before Snade's consciousness dissipated, the last thing he saw was the terrifying demon of the swarm that was constantly talking in its sleep. The Scourge Swarm was a high-level existence among the descendants of the Tyrant Worm. It was a monster that had broken out of the body of the parasitic Tanali demon after completely devouring the consciousness of the latter. Each of the acid mist worms was formed by the violent helpers and blind followers of the material plane who had fallen into the abyss. These guys gathered together in the form of a swarm in the acid mist canyon, the 473rd level of the abyss. They parasitized the body of the evil demon and were born from a destruction that was more profound than the desire of the Tanali demons to destroy. These guys, who were originally just evil followers, had finally become even more evil. The swarm of acid mist worms formed a monster's body. Driven by the common hunger of the worms in its body, it was like a walking disaster that was looking for the flesh and blood of creatures that could fill this hunger. Demons, acid mist worms, and other scourge swarm were all excellent materials that they wanted to turn into nutrients for their bodies. If this guy is a lich, then what are we? We are called swarm because we are numerous, We are called disaster because we do all kinds of evil, We are called scourge swarm because we are numerous and we do all kinds of evil, Praise the great tyrant worm, There was reason in the madness. Although the young Tenali demons of the Scourge Swarm were always in endless ravings, it could not be denied that they knew how to effectively carry out evil deeds. By devouring the flesh and consciousness of the victims, especially the demons of the lower realms, whose souls and bodies were one, the Scourge Swarm could always learn some unique skills, such as the ability to use spells. When the palm formed by a large swarm of squirming worms was attached to the control node, the Scourge Swarm single-handedly reactivated the ritual array that the Lich had set up only to peel off the parasites. Did we really create a monster? A brand new species? A feat comparable to the great tyrant worm? You're full of nonsense. Those who speak nonsense must be punished. The punish part was prioritized to be converted into the energy needed to activate the ritual array. As a large number of worms on the Scourge Swarm's body turned into shriveled shells due to the exhaustion of life force, the ritual array used to awaken a brand new undead creature that combined the characteristics of soul catchers and necrofiends continued to operate. The abyssal soil covered by the ritual array trembled as if it had a pulse. The flesh and limbs used as sacrifices were pulled into the depths of the earth by the soil. The dark flesh piled up on the various nodes was now gathered at the center of the ritual array, like a mound of graves that had spontaneously formed. The severed limbs wrapped in the mound of graves quickly decayed under the influence of the negative energy field that was constantly dense with the power of blasphemy. Wisps of phosphorescence lingered around the mound of graves, as if the souls had been ignited and imprisoned and were bound here by an oath. When all the sacrifices were piled up and decayed, a mound of graves more than 10 meters tall suddenly formed. It seemed that even the earth of the abyssal plane, which was already filthy to begin with, loathed the blasphemous creation created by this spell. The huge mound of graves suddenly looked like a punctured cyst. Yellow-green liquid gushed out from the bottom of the mound like pus and sprayed over the entire mound of graves. A brand new undead monster had been awakened. From a distance, this creature looked like a clumsy giant made of mud and stones, but upon closer observation, one could distinguish the hands, head, and other limbs protruding from the body of the deceased. A large amount of yellow-green pus gushed out from the core of his body, gathered into streams on the surface of his body, and then flowed to his feet, polluting the whole earth. The phosphorescence that originally lingered on the huge mound of graves now gathered in the empty holes that looked like facial features, emitting an even more demonic light. Thou art called the bringer of disaster. All the voices in the Scourge Swarm shouted the same words, which was rare. The huge monster that had been given a name roared towards the sky, as if celebrating its rebirth. Attack! The target is the Batsid Devil's camp. Tear those cowardly devils to shreds. For the glory of the worm tyrant. The Scourge Swarm regained its original chaotic ravings, but also gave the monster its first clear goal. Chapter 58. I'm no longer who I used to be. This was the life motto of most liches. This was not a philosophical thought, but a fact that the undead creatures themselves pointed out. In order to prevent any mishaps in his escape plan, the Drow Lich Snade chose to resurrect himself from his phylactery right after he had destroyed himself. For this reason, he had to bear the pain of losing a part of his real life stored in his phylactery and was forced to degenerate into a Demolich. He lost his body and became a floating skull. As soon as he came back to life, he sensed that there were no longer those terrifying, nightmarish maggots in his body. The great joy even affected the Otherworld Gate spell he had prepared to escape from the abyss. He suddenly realized that this spell was activated by a spell scroll that was specially stored in his phylactery. It should not have disappeared suddenly because of a mistake in his incantation. Anti-magic field. As soon as he realized what had affected the effect of the spell, the floating skull of the Demolich was clamped by a strong hand. Hello, Mr. Lich. Or should I call you Demolich now? The blue dragon youth greeted the captive in his hand. How do you defeat a lich? Find his phylactery and break it. This was what he had heard from a rookie girl who liked to play as a paladin when he was running a team game. Although it was a little rough, It was a concise and comprehensive way to solve the problem. Keyes, who had rich experience in running a team game, had a rough idea of what might be hiding behind when he saw so many undead creatures mixed in with the demon army. After the battle began, the Blue Dragon youth deployed the battle plan and plunged into the command room of the stronghold that he had modified into a magic laboratory. The Lich was preparing for an escape experiment, and Keyes was preparing for a capture experiment. With a stronghold as his foundation, Keyes could now mobilize the magic materials and resources that he could even squander a little. After stacking 3 layers of unorthodox spells that increased his luck attribute, he used a limited prayer spell to summon the Lich's phylactery into his capture trap. This saved him some preparation and magic materials. Phylacteries were usually the best items kept by Liches, and there was only a small chance that they would be captured by praying spells. It was the demon lord of this plane, the Tyrant Worm, who had tried to capture the phylactery the last time. However, even someone as powerful as him had failed to do so. This was probably the best way to describe this situation, a protagonist with great luck encountering a bitter fate. The captured Lich phylactery was placed in the anti-magic circle, which was the real reason why Snade's gate to alternate realm failed. You don't. The imprisoned Drow Lich instinctively wanted to resist in anger. Although the anti-magic field could restrict the effects of some spells, the Lich's ability to control arcane spells had become second nature to him. It wasn't as if he had no way of retaliating. However, when he saw that the sharp blade was less than an inch away from his phylactery, he was so angry that he felt as if he was placed under the warm sun. His anger instantly turned into fear. Keyes looked at the half-Lich's reaction with satisfaction. Blue the Ogre was holding the Blue Dragon's adamantine scythe. If the Lich showed any signs of resistance, he wouldn't hesitate to smash the phylactery into pieces. Now we can talk, Mr. Half-Lich. Name? Place of birth? Home address? Snade, whose life was threatened, chose to compromise. After carefully answering the question raised by the despicable human in front of him, he tried to tempt him. Young man, I have to say that you're well prepared. In this situation, even a Lich can't do anything. But you must have a request, right? How about the powerful spell information? I can give you the spell book. Or do you want a ransom? As an old man with thousands of years of collection, you have to believe that I have some wealth. We can make a deal. A deal, that's right. But if you still mix in some spells when you speak, my friend will definitely make you regret it. After receiving the hint, the clever Blue immediately understood Keyes' intention. He immediately stabbed the sharp blade into Snade's phylactery. No, because his phylactery was damaged, Snade felt a terrible pain that was worse than death by 1,000 cuts. He hurriedly begged. This is the right attitude to make a deal. Keyes took out a contract made with the skin of an underworld demon. This was what he obtained from the real Yugro's magic merchant's clearance. Although he lost a lot of soul prism, as long as he used it properly, he would be able to recoup the cost. He didn't expect to use it so quickly. Let's sign a labor contract. Keyes slowly showed the scroll to the half-Lich. 100 years of labor in exchange for freedom. It's worth it. I want to see the contents of the contract. Blue, I'll sign it. Under Quest's manual persuasion, Lich Snade had no choice but to sign his secret imprint on the contract. Originally, he wanted to tamper with the secret imprint, but in the end, he helplessly discovered that the damned contract had an anti-counterfeiting function. Only the heavens knew where this damned brat had obtained such a high-level magical creation. Mr. Half-Lich Snade, it turns out that you used to be a drow from the world of Toril. Nice to meet you. Looking at the secret imprint on the contract, Keyes was satisfied and carefully put it away. Now, let's perform your first service. That undead monster should be created by you, right? Brew and his new subordinates walked out of the gate of the Fortress Command Center. On the platform at the gate, Quest pointed at a giant monster that was 100 feet tall that could be seen from miles away. It's the final product of my experiment, but I didn't complete it. Snade, who had turned into a half-Lich, suddenly remembered that when his original Lich body was disintegrated by the ritual, The evil monster that appeared as unclear memory was probably him who continued the ritual that he had stopped. Even though he had turned into a half-lich, his reasoning and analysis ability did not disappear. However, Snade's speculation was wrong. It was not him, but them. Just like the ancient Greek philosophers on Earth asserted that self-consciousness is just an illusion of continuity, this sentence simply summed up the behavior of the new Tana Reed demons like the Scourge Swarm in one word. Freedom. Freedom. How many sins have been committed in the name of thee? The road to conquest is paved with the wreckage of the innocent. In the 50 years of life, there is no one who doesn't kill. All sorts of ravings came out of the wriggling bodies of the cataclysmic worms. This was caused by a small part of the memories and personalities of the previous life that each of the cataclysmic worms that formed the body of the cataclysmic worms had awakened after gaining power. Although the language was extremely chaotic, the instructions that they gave to their creations, the messengers of disaster, were clear and unmistakable. Attack. Destroy the Batsa Devil's stronghold. Chapter 59. Wishes aren't fish, otherwise, everyone would cast a net. Although Keyes had successfully recruited the Demolic Snade, he still had to face the huge trouble of advancing towards the stronghold. Are you sure that undead creature can't be controlled? Keyes asked the floating skull beside him. Sir, you don't have to doubt this. I've tried 3 times and still couldn't establish a telepathic connection. This means that it already has a controller. The Demolic replied to Keyes in an unchanging cold tone. According to that damned agreement, as long as it was a task given by Keyes during the period of labor, he couldn't refuse or misinterpret it. Otherwise, his intelligence would be permanently reduced as a punishment. In order to confirm who was controlling the slowly moving monster behind the scenes, Snade summoned his gargoyle, Butler, from afar. It was this gargoyle's report that allowed him and Keyes to understand that it was the work of a group of cataclysmic worms. What a big deal. This undead creature probably has the strength of a legendary monster. Keyes silently assessed in his heart. Sir Commander, the monster has entered the attack range of the Hellscream and the spellcasters. A Bone Devil messenger sent a new message. Order all the cannons to adjust the angle and focus fire. Keyes thought for a moment and then continued. Order the spellcasters to prioritize sealing the hole that connects to the back of the 3rd layer of defense. Be sure to ensure that such a sudden attack doesn't happen again. The 4 commanders' orders were passed down as quickly as possible, and they were carried out even more quickly. The enemy's huge figure made it easy for Keyes' barbed devils to aim the cannons. A total of 100 cannons called Hellscream fired in unison, producing a deafening sound. The rising smoke filled the entire artillery position in the stronghold. 2/3 of the hundreds of cannons hit the target, while most of the remaining cannons bombed the forest around the target. The huge impact made the giant made of corpses and decayed soil stagger. As if it felt a huge pain, the phosphorescence that made up its facial features boiled. The web-like meridians made of yellow-green pus sprayed out a large amount of disgusting liquid, polluting a large area of the surrounding land. The group of cataclysmic worms hiding behind their own creation was naturally not affected by the artillery fire. Looking at the surrounding forest that was ignited by the artillery fire and the other Thana-wreathed demons that had fallen to the ground, they let out a maniacal laugh, as if they were celebrating that they were intact, but also as if they were mocking the others who had fallen to the ground. This evil creature, made of worms, bent down, and its palm into the ground, pulling out a piece of the artillery shell embedded in it. The shell piece was covered with a mixture of pink and green juice, which was left behind by an acidic worm that was hit by a ricochet bullet. Most of the cataclysmic worms, remains of cataclysmic worms' TTSST. The group of cataclysmic worms stuffed the remains of the pink-green worm into their bodies. Surprisingly, the acidic worm that had died due to the explosion was reborn in the body of the group of worms. This was a specially evolved acidic worm. Its size was far smaller than other worms of the same species, and it had no offensive ability. The meaning of its existence was to be used as a communication tool for the high-level worms. After quietly sensing the information conveyed by the worm, the group of cataclysmic worms immediately took the reborn worm out of their bodies. The claws made of worms grabbed a large amount of soil, and then the group of cataclysmic worms buried the pink-green worm back into the ground. We are called cataclysmic worms because we have a large number of people. At this moment, a new barrage of cannon fire once again engulfed the huge body of the calamity swarm. The giant made of corpses and rotten soil staggered again, and the bullet holes on its body that had yet to heal deepened a little. Gurgle, gurgle. Ugh. The cataclysmic worms spat out a dark, corrosive missile composed of negative energy and yellowish-green corpse fluid. The missile flew towards the fortress defenders that had attacked it from above. The cataclysmic worms had used the method of spitting to launch the first attack since its birth. The disgusting monster's thick phlegm also possessed astonishing destructive power. Although the attack did not hit the artillery troops behind the defensive line, the third layer of defense outside the fortress was spat in the face by the thick phlegm. 2.5 squads of 10 people, nearly 30 otherworldly mercenaries, and 2 squad leaders were all baptized by the yellowish-green corpse fluid missile. No matter how good their armor was, it was impossible for them to avoid the powerful impact. Not to mention, the cataclysmic worm's thick phlegm also contained lethal poison. All the fallen defenders were quickly poisoned to death. But this was not the end. The yellowish-green mucus contained negative energy that contaminated every inch of the ground it came in contact with. As the sticky liquid spread, large mud pits filled with negative energy formed. The corpses of the fallen soldiers all underwent terrifying changes. The corpses that had fallen began to convulse, and the souls that had yet to dissipate were bound by the mud that was filled with negative energy. Zombies covered in mucus crawled up from the mud. Be careful of those zombies. Are there any priests or mages? Disperse the poison and the negative energy field. The military police squad, made up of several bone devils and barb devils, immediately suppressed the soldiers who were panicking and immediately made an emergency response according to the situation. However, the cataclysmic worms that was moving towards the fortress saw that its attack was effective. More thick phlegm, missiles were spat out from its mouth. The sticky and deadly yellowish-green liquid was thrown at Key's fortress again and again. Not only did it break down a small section of the wall, but it also connected the poisonous mud that was filled with negative energy on the ground. What's more, in a moment of excitement, the cataclysmic worms even pulled off one of its arms and threw it at the fortress defensive wall as a weapon. Don't retreat. Teams of military police led by bone devils and barb devils stopped the panic that was gradually spreading. Under the threat of the hooked spears and machetes, most of the soldiers from the other dimension chose to compromise. The scattered soldiers were cleaned up by these military police squads on the spot. Even if they were infected by negative energy, it would be difficult for them to turn into undead creatures. Mr. Ricknaz, how's your observation record? Key stood in the fortress command room and asked through the communication circle. Under the protection of Golem number 21 and the 3 Ogre brothers, the Goblin Master Engineer volunteered to lead his men to the periphery of the battlefield. He set up a new invention in some inconspicuous corners that could allow him to observe the entire battlefield more objectively. The Goblin Battlefield Observer. This new invention was covered in camouflage rocks, and its core looked like a beholder made of metal. The dozens of mechanical eyes all over the core could achieve the effect of having no blind spots through stretching and twisting. In addition to the normal observation system, this Goblin Battlefield Observer also used the principle of infrared imaging to simulate night vision. This function could also be used to see through some of the enemies who used low-level stealth. The energy source for this new invention was the lead-acid battery that Keyes had obtained from the manufacturing factory of Cotman in the desert of the Ashen World. This battery, with a simple structure but unexpectedly easy to use, gave the goblin Ricknaz a lot of surprises. After understanding the principle, he clearly realized that this was a brand new form of energy storage other than steam energy and magic energy, the 2 energy sources that the research team, led by the Wrench family, had researched the most. According to Key's explanation, this was a brand new field of knowledge that converted matter into electricity through chemical changes. With a small energy source, he was able to invent this brand new Goblin battlefield observer. Commander Keyes, I think you may need to take a look at this. Ricknaz replied to Keyes after installing the last observer. Through the dozens of new inventions that had been set up, with the fortress as the center, the situation within a radius of a few miles was fully displayed on the magic sand table in the command room, where Keyes was. Outside the basin where the fortress is located, a large number of demon armies have been discovered gathering. These are all demons parasitized by the acid mistworms. The goblin Ricknaz and the others had already opened a portal and returned to the battle command room through the beacon they had set up in advance. Other than the mechanical warrior who could not possibly have any expression and often had strange opinions, everyone else had grave expressions on their faces. So, this troublesome monster in front of us is actually a feint, and its goal is still to create chaos. Then, what is their real attack? Keyes was speaking to his newly recruited little brother, the half-lich Snade. Among everyone present, he was the only one who had stayed in this level of the abyss for more than 300 years. The half-lich looked at the huge demon army that was about to gather on the magic sand table and said in a cold tone, "The Worm Gate. It must be the Worm Gate. I will open the Worm Gate for thee. All troops attack." The swarm of catastrophes that had been standing behind the gigantic disaster emissary were now standing on top of the monster's head. The swarm of catastrophes once again burst out with uniform words. Worms slid down from their bodies, and the entire swarm of catastrophes melted like snow in the span of a breath. They covered the monster's head and shoulders, as if a blanket of acid mist worms had been placed over it. Worm Gate, Worm Gate, Worm Gate. Every single acid mist worm that formed the swarm of catastrophes was now chanting the same slogan in the language of the abyss. It was an announcement, but also a reminder of what they had to do next. It could not be helped. The swarm of catastrophes had already lost most of their intelligence after removing their collective state. As they reminded each other, the acid mist worms that formed the carpet twisted and quickly formed a large door structure. Chapter 60. As the doorway formed by worms quickly took shape, the pace of the bringer of disaster, which was the base of the door, was greatly accelerated. This giant, made of corpses and decayed soil, dragged its huge feet that were constantly dripping with dark green mucus as it charged straight towards the Batsa Devil's fortress that was bombarded by the cannons. In the fortress command room, through the Goblin Observer node that the Goblin Ricknaz had set up, the surrounding enemy situation was clearly displayed on the sand table in front of Keyes and the others. The situation was not optimistic. Mr. Keyes, according to the current situation, the demon army around the basin will move to the vicinity of the fortress in at most 2 hourglasses. As he remotely controlled the observer, Ricknaz summarized the situation in a concise manner. "Boy, I don't know what you're relying on, but based on the current situation, your Camp Batsu can't resist the attack of so many demons." The Demolik Snade's remaining head floated on the sand table. In order to prove that what he said was true, he continued to add, "What's more, although you have a certain number of troops here, most of them are mercenaries from the material plane. There aren't many intermediate and advanced demon soldiers. The higher-ups of the Batsa Devil have obviously abandoned you. Your best choice is to let me use the gate between worlds." With a wave of his hand, the floating Demolika's head was immediately silenced. This was an additional payment of the contract that gave Keyes, the employer, the power. Because the employer had the final right of explanation, Keyes could directly make Snade, who had signed the contract, stop communicating with him with a simple gesture. Those who disturb the morale of the army will be beheaded. Keyes glanced coldly at the Demolik. After saying this, he put his energy back into the defensive deduction. At this time, the bringer of disaster, who had launched a counterattack due to the cannons and caused a lot of trouble to the fortress's defensive position, had already rushed to the front of the fortress. Act according to the original plan. First, get rid of the undead monster and prevent it from destroying the defensive line. When the Bone Demon Herald passed the order of the fortress commander to the front line, the bringer of disaster had already arrived less than 100 meters away from the third layer of the fortress's defensive line. Although the cannons and other long-range attacks slowed down its speed, their effect was limited to this. The Tana Reet demons, who had been scattered and fled in the last wave, ran out of the fungus forest again under the effect of the parasitic acid mist worms in their bodies. They gathered around the emissary of disaster, relying on its huge body as cover, and at the same time acting as supplies. After several rounds of fire from the cannons, the bringer of disaster's body was continuously shattered. However, it only needed to grab the other demons around it and use them as medicine to effectively heal itself. The underworld demons characteristic of soul and body, they were the best medicine for the bringer of disaster, a new type of undead monster with the dual characteristics of soul captors and tomb demons. Was the best. Naturally, the Tana Re Abyss Devils did not have the resolve to sacrifice their lives for the greater good. However, at this moment, the parasitic acid mist worms in their bodies had interfered with the demon's consciousness, making them ignore the fear of death and willingly become the bringer of disaster's tonic. The bringer of disaster, who had consumed a large number of tonics, could not only approach the enemy while constantly healing, but its original vomit attack had also been greatly strengthened. The highly toxic phlegm that could not only kill the enemy, but also use negative energy to turn the dead creatures into zombies. The bringer of disaster was wantonly spraying it as if it was free, which imperceptibly put a lot of pressure and fear on the fortress's defenders. This can't go on. I have to find a way to escape. Broom-brows, Dalton looked at the assault team that had lost more than half of its members and carefully looked for an opportunity to slip away. If it weren't for the demon gendarmerie who had been shuttling back and forth in the defensive line and patrolling, this master of shadow thieves with a hidden second profession would have run away long ago. At this time, a large area of the defensive line had been turned into a filthy quagmire full of negative energy by the bringer of disaster's vomit. Fortunately, there were some priests among the defenders who believed in God. They constantly retreated or dispersed the undead defenders who had turned into zombies. However, as more and more undead creatures appeared, more and more difficult opponents like ghouls and ghouls gradually appeared, which increased the pressure on the defenders. Seeing more and more undead creatures wreaking havoc in the defensive line, even with the devil gendarmerie suppressing them, panic still sprung up like bamboo shoots after the rain, quickly spreading among the mercenaries from the other planes. The target is in position. A diviner in the spellcaster army who was in charge of detection shouted with all his strength. He was loudly reporting to his colleagues that the terrifying giant undead monster, the bringer of disaster, had stepped into the trap that had been prepared long ago. Although Snade was extremely unwilling to continue fighting in this fortress, under the effect of the contract, he had to contribute his strength to Key's plan. The magic trap that he personally designed, as he was most familiar with the characteristics of the undead creatures, was the most important part of the series of plans made to eliminate the bringer of disaster. The giant undead creature created by the combination of the ritual spells used to create soul catchers and necropolis demons is undoubtedly extremely powerful. However, the original design plan was only to borrow part of the effects of the ritual circle, not to actually summon the monster. Therefore, there is a serious flaw that cannot be remedied: the accumulation of damage. It absorbs corpses and souls to strengthen its various resistances and increase its life force. It also accumulates negative resistances in its body that can cause special damage to the creatures it absorbs. Currently, it absorbs most of the essence of the Tana Reet demons and the Batsu Devil. Therefore, at this time, Keys was tossing a silver coin in his hand, which made a pleasant tinkling sound. Silver coins were called poisonous claws in the lower realms. The reason for its name was very simple. Whether it was the Tana Reet demons, the Batsa Devil, or the Yugoloth demons, these demons that lived and bred in the lower realms would feel a needle-like pain when they came into contact with this kind of currency. If mortals held silver-plated weapons in their hands, They would often have an unexpected advantage when fighting these demons. Silver-plated weapons had a natural effect of increasing the damage done to the demons. Demons, who were known for their super high physique, would find it difficult to exert their powerful self-healing ability to heal themselves in battle if they were cut by a silver-plated weapon, even if it was only a small wound. It was precisely because of this that silver coins, a currency that was often second only to gold coins and other material planes, would be discarded like a pair of worn-out shoes in the lower planes, no matter how greedy the demons were. For them, the value of silver coins was not even comparable to the value of copper coins, known as greenhorns. Keyes happened to know this. Because he wanted to carry out the infiltration battle in the Abyss Plain, he had long collected a batch of these strategic materials from the Yugoloth Merchants' Chamber of Commerce. One soul prism was exchanged for 500 kilograms of silver. At such a fair price, Keyes bought and hoarded nearly 20 tons of this metal from the Judgment Demon. Preparing for a rainy day, this preparation really came in handy at this time. If it was a world without magic, it would take some effort to process these metals. But there were spellcasters in this world. With the help of the spellcasters in the fortress, a level 4 transformation spell, Garusto's Metal Dissolution, solved the problem. Under the effect of the spell, the silver ingot first turned into a liquid state and then weaved into a connected silver net according to the will of the spellcaster. Pieces of silver ingot turned into nets shining with a metallic luster, and the nets were placed into the hollow cannonballs. Just as the Apostle of Calamity stepped into the large-scale undead creature dispelling magic circle set up by the demonic Snade himself, it frantically tried to escape from the trap that weakened its body and reduced its mobility. The cannons loaded with new ammunition began to bombard it indiscriminately. The silver bullets hit the body of the Calamity Apostle and exploded in all directions. The net made of pure silver was instantly embedded in the monster's huge body. Pain, excruciating pain, the pain that drove the Apostle of Disaster insane, instantly filled its already unclear mind, if it even had one. The damage caused by the silver net was 100 times more serious than the previous cannonballs. Just as Snade had expected, after the Calamity Apostle absorbed a large number of bodies and souls of the lower realm creatures, its resistance to the negative effects of silver had accumulated to an extremely high level. The Calamity Apostle was covered by the silver bullets. Under the nourishment of the flesh and souls of the Thanner demons, its body that had become more solid became riddled with holes. The flesh and blood covered by the remnants of the earth quickly withered and lost its vitality. The deadly silver net was deeply embedded in its body with the cannonballs. Every time it tried to dig out or squeeze out through the flesh and blood of the body, it would take away a large part of the connected body. The efforts to use the yellow-green, sticky corpses that constantly exuded a blasphemous aura to annihilate and corrode the silver net in the body were offset by more and more intensive bombardment. Those responsible for firing the cannonballs were some barbed demons. Even through the shell of the cannonballs, they would be affected by the silver net loaded inside. Therefore, these demons desperately increased the firing frequency, wanting to send these uncomfortable cannonballs to the enemy as quickly as possible. If the Calamity Apostle, a newborn undead monster, had the ability to think, it would have tasted an emotion called despair at this moment. As more and more silver net cannonballs were embedded, its originally huge body was shrinking at a speed visible to the naked eye. Snade's trap originally only made it feel some shackles, but the subsequent bombardment of silver bullets made it unable to struggle at all. Even if there were many Thanner demons around it providing supplements, the increase in the negative effects brought by each demon increased the damage caused by the silver net by several times. A powerful undead monster that had just been born and had evolved to the legendary realm was actually knocked down by less than 2 tons of silver. It was really unbelievable, but it was also reasonable. So, no matter how powerful the monster is, it can't withstand the players who can buy money. War is really about money. In Keyes' battle command room, The mechanical warrior, standing next to the goblin Renaz, summed it up with the strange words it was good at. Chapter 61. As the Harbinger disaster was smashed to death by Keyes' silver bullet attack outside the fortress walls, the mission given by the Harbinger disaster was ultimately aborted. The Harbinger disaster's original plan was to use this giant made of rotten soil and corpses to break through the defenses of Keyes' fortress. They would then open the worm gate inside the defensive position and cooperate with the already assembled demon army to form a pincer attack. With the fall of the Harbinger disaster, the worm gate was forced to close, and the worms that formed the huge portico once again disintegrated and reformed in the form of the Harbinger of disaster. This guy is the Harbinger of disaster? A construct armor standing in the distance, which was originally advancing with the Harbinger of disaster's attack, suddenly asked this question near the newly reformed Harbinger of disaster. The horrifying armor was a high-level construct, and its cost far exceeded that of ordinary activated constructs. These activated constructs were different from the golems. They were not extremely sturdy bodies made of materials such as clay or steel. They looked more like gorgeous armors that could move freely. The empty parts inside the armor were carved with ritual circles or directly instilled with magic power by the creator, which usually made the armor immune to 4 specific spells or some spell-like abilities. Anyone who thought that the horrifying armor was fragile because of this would certainly find that they were so wrong after they started to use it. Not only did the horrifying armor have physical strength close to that of high-level golems, but some well-made creations could also understand the commands of their creators and flexibly use their unique spell-like abilities to fight. As long as the owner of the horrifying armor held the core amulet, they could easily control the actions of the activated constructs. Therefore, they were always treated as personal bodyguards by spellcasters who were proficient in various arcane skills, but were physically weak and inactive. At this time, the amulet of the horrifying armor bodyguard was in the hands of its new employer, Keyes. This was also one of the reasonable explanations of the contract. The contractor had to cooperate with the employer's service requirements in many ways, such as temporarily lending some unnecessary personal items. Who art thou? What the hell are you? That lich from before. The Harbinger of disaster used different words to respond to the words that came out of the horrifying armor. At the same time, a slime ball with the diameter of an adult's height responded. Double entendre was their usual trick. The slime magic ball would quickly solidify once it touched the body. If the gaps of the armor were filled with the slime, it was very likely that the user's mobility would be restricted. However, playing tricks while speaking wasn't a technique unique to the Calamity Bugs. As soon as the slime magic ball touched the armor of terror, the latter's body burst like a soap bubble. Greater Mirror Image was an illusion-type spell that could perfectly imitate the speech and actions of the caster. It could even deceive some creatures that had the Eye of Truth. Realizing that they had been tricked, the cataclysmic bugs instinctively dodged any possible attacks. But how could the enemy, who had already seized the opportunity, let them do as they wished? A long sword with sawtooth pierced through the void, deeply embedding itself into the body of the worms. The Calamity Bugs wanted to mock the attack that was supposed to be ineffective against them because of their special bodies. But before he could say anything, he was quickly silenced by the effects of the spell. A large amount of amber slime spurted out from the weight of the sawtooth sword and quickly covered the wriggling bodies of the Calamity Bugs. Under the effect of the spell attached to the sword, the Calamity Bugs' many attempts to take the sword out were all in vain. After being trapped in the acid fog canyon for 300 years, the former lich, who was now a Demolic, Snade, was very familiar with the worms of this plane. Whether it was because of the necessity of studying a way to escape, or simply because of his hatred for the worms, he invented some spells that specifically targeted the acid fogworms. Snade's worm specimen-making spell was one of them. As a special spell to deal with the Calamity Bugs, the evolved form of the acid fogworms, in addition to the 2 effects of species-targeted strong immobilization and wax amber seal, This spell also filled the internal gaps of the calamity bugs with highly concentrated fluid. A large amount of water was extracted from the calamity bugs, and the fluid dyed the wax amber with a dark green color. The terrifying armor that caused all this, or rather, the person behind the armor, held the sawtooth sword handle that had been sprayed clean and pulled it away from the calamity bugs that had been made into specimens by the spell. It seems that I still underestimated this monster. Snade, the effect of your specimen catching spell is still not satisfactory. The terrifying armor imitated every word and action of the current controller. Even the movement of turning its head was imitated to perfection. At this time, although the calamity bugs and the wax amber specimen had difficulty moving, they still had the strength to curse and struggle. As if it had received an answer, the helmet nodded slightly a few times and then took out other means as a follow-up. Withering needle of imprisonment. The terrifying armor took off an inconspicuous long nail from the armor and filled the gap left by the sawtooth sword in the specimen's wax seal. The long nail fit perfectly into the calamity swarm, and the enchantment effect took effect instantly. A wave of energy formed by the power of exhaustion eliminated the remaining power of the calamity swarm. Even the spell-like means that they had secretly prepared were dispelled by the deep exhaustion. A pincer attack from both the inside and the outside. The original plan of the Cataclysm Swarm had been realized in another form. At this time, a team of Batsid Devil, composed entirely of bone demons, teleported to the Calamity Bug specimen. This kind of high-level demon that was like an acid mistworm, whether it was for his own research or to later hand it over to the Batsid Devil bureaucracy that had an extremely long and hard-to-remember name in exchange for rewards. It was a very good choice. Therefore, he could not just leave it here and waste it. The lucky ones died right away, while the unlucky ones were half dead. These were the words of a bard who had stayed in this mercenary fortress for some time. Many people agreed with him. The bard was very lucky. He blocked the first wave of demons and undead creatures that had just come out of the tunnel, so he was easily killed. The remaining defenders had to endure for a long time. After the Calamity Messenger was killed and the Calamity Bugs were turned into specimens, the people in the fortress finally got a rare chance to breathe. The Bone Demons, who acted as messengers, informed the captains of each team that the demon army would return in an hourglass at most. Therefore, most of the defenders who had survived the disaster chose to take turns to rest in the resting area of the defensive position. Couldn't those mages have been more careful? A soldier who was carrying a wounded person with a missing arm and a broken leg to the medical camp for anesthetized sutures pulled off the pig nose mask on his face as soon as he returned to the resting area. The half-covering mask that the sorcerers and the craftsmen hurriedly made before the battle to protect themselves from the pungent acid fog in the dimension of Acid Fog Canyon was pinching his nose so hard that it hurt. The soldier couldn't help but grumble. Broom Eyebrows, who was leaning against the wall, could not help but sneer when he heard the soldier's complaint. "You're still being picky in the devil's camp? You're just cannon fodder. What's there to complain about? If you have the guts, just like those idiots who were slowly killed by the acid fog, just throw that thing aside and be done with it." Dalton did not suffer the pain of having his nose pinched. He did not wear a gas mask because he had a better choice, a well-made and expensive enchanted mask that fit the contours of his face. Of course, like the soldier, he took off his enchanted mask and breathed in the clean air filtered by the magic circle in the resting area. In fact, most of the mercenaries from the other plane who were resting in the resting area did the same. They were not like his surviving subordinates in the assault team, who seized the opportunity to lie down and sleep as soon as they entered the resting area due to exhaustion. Broombrows was still far from being exhausted. He still had enough energy left in him. He leaned against the wall and narrowed his eyes slightly. As he rested, he secretly observed his other colleagues. This was his habit. Wherever he went, he would weigh his options and find someone who was capable enough. After all, they were fighting against the devil army in this fortress. It was not like the world he had been in before he went to hell, where the two armies fought like chickens pecking at each other. The smart Dalton realized that he could only survive longer in this war if he teamed up with someone who was strong enough. He did not want to be dragged to death by a useless teammate one day. Finally, Broom Eyebrows, who had been pretending to rest but was actually quietly observing and analyzing, found someone who seemed to be a good candidate to team up with. It was a stranger who was somewhat familiar. He was only equipped with the standard half-stamped breastplate and round shield issued by the Devils of Batsu. Inside, he was wearing a sleeveless linen robe. He was barefooted as he sat cross-legged by the wall. A scarred longsword rested quietly on his knees. The pig's beak gas mask that he had taken off was casually tossed aside. This was a young man who looked to be in his early 20s. The beard on his face was still stubby, so there was no way to completely cover the tattoo on his face. Although the shape of his face was rather thin, he was quite tall. Even if he was sitting cross-legged on the ground, Dalton estimated that he was at least 4 feet tall. From the shape of the muscles on his arms exposed outside the robe, it could be seen that he had undergone long-term professional training in swordsmanship or other weapons. And the barefoot tattooed face was very likely to be a criminal who had been punished. And it was this person, this sword and shield warrior who seemed to have been punished by Mo Xing, that gave Dalton a special feeling. He was both strange and familiar. Speaking of strange, there were soldiers from all corners of the multiverse in the Batsa Devil's otherworldly mercenary camp. Vicious or perverted criminals were not rare, including the Knoll priest who was killed by Dalton. He had seen all kinds of scum. Even if he just sniffed with his nose, he could recognize the unique smell of those guys. But this young man was different. Although his bright eyes reflected the light of pain and confusion from time to time, a knowledgeable old man like Dalton could still see the conscience and mercy hidden in them. Speaking of familiarity, the sword and shield warrior's eyes were so familiar. Helplessness, depression, puzzlement, all kinds of emotions suppressed his conscience and nature. He was always in self-doubt and always wanted to find a way to spiritual relief. This appearance reminded Dalton of a person he was very familiar with. He really looks like that kid. Maybe he's also a sacred samurai. Well, it seems that he's only a former sacred samurai. Chapter 62. The person whom Dalton was very familiar with was his son, the son of a saint samurai who chose to serve God and embarked on the path of exemplary example. But his father was a mafia boss and a master of shadow thieves who was friend with violence and companions with shadows. This combination was really a bit out of place. This was also one of Dalton's secrets. Any gang member who wanted to inquire about this secret had their necks broken by his own hands. He's so similar to that idiot. Perhaps because his thoughts drifted too far away, the always cautious Broom Eyebrows focused on the barefoot warrior with tattoos on his face for too long. As a result, he was felt by the warrior. A calm and determined gaze was cast over. Dalton did not avoid it. He just showed a self-mocking smile and then turned his eyes back to the others. Originally, this name was followed by the word fan to replace the surname and to show that he was a saint samurai who worshipped God. But after his title as a saint samurai was taken away due to his conviction, even if he still listened to God's teachings devoutly and did not lose any power from his faith, he could only use the ordinary name of Jason to introduce himself to others. The reason for his conviction was that he murdered a viscount, because he saw this noble who swore allegiance to the king wantonly bullying an orphan girl. He drew his sword and killed him in a fit of anger. As a saint samurai who worshipped the god of justice and law, he violated the law by murdering the viscount. After being stripped of his title as a saint samurai, he was imprisoned in the king's prison. The reality was so ironic, but the more ironic fact was that even though he was already in prison, there were still people who wanted to send him to hell. As compensation for his life, after being sentenced to imprisonment, Jason automatically became a slave of the Viscount's family. He needed to use a lifetime of service to make up for his mistakes. This agreement was written by the chief judge who also worshipped the god of law. After being signed by Jason, it automatically came into effect. But it was this agreement that caused his road of atonement to start in hell mode from the beginning. The Viscount, who was tragically killed by Jason, had signed other contracts with the demons of the lower world. When the contract demons belonging to the Batsu people came to collect debts, the Viscount's family did not hesitate to use Jason's service agreement as collateral and handed it over to the demons. After all, sending a Saint Samurai to hell, even a former Saint Samurai, was worth a lot of money. Because of this, the Viscount family easily paid off their debt, and the ordinary Jensen walked into an extraordinary bloody battlefield. It was a pair of eyes that were observing the young paladin. The owner of the gaze realized that he had been discovered, and a faint smile appeared on his face. Before Jason could respond, the horn to assemble instantly woke up all the soldiers who were enjoying a nap in the lounge. The demons have appeared again, as Jason muttered to himself. Most of the soldiers quickly put on their pig-nose gas masks, tightened their armors, picked up their weapons, and ran back to their respective positions. In the command room of the fortress, Keyes looked at the imprisoned living specimen of the Calamity Swarm and focused his attention on the magic sandbox in the hall. Commander Keyes, the deployment work has been completed. I have personally confirmed all the links. Ricknaz once again walked into the command room. Under the lead of Keyes, this goblin noble who originally only had the task of observing and learning was deeply involved in this war. After completing the goblin observer arrangement, he continued to carry out the arrangements of the young blue dragon. Thank you for your support, Your Excellency. Keyes nodded and pointed at the sandbox with a solemn expression as he said to his companions. According to the information transmitted from the observer node, the number of demons we are about to face will definitely exceed any of the previous battles, and even more than all the demons we have faced before combined. Even if we plan for the best, the fall of the fortress is only a matter of time, and it is very likely that everyone present will personally participate in this battle. Everyone. Only by helping each other and working together can we achieve our original goal, to leave this war alive. There was a saying in the art of war: encircle with 10, attack with 5, and fight with double. Outside the fortress defense line, the number of demons had already exceeded the number of defenders by nearly 100 times, and as more demons continued to surge in from all over the acid fog canyon, this number continued to rise. Not only was the fortress commanded by Keyes facing the pressure of the army, but the other 99 airdrop camps of the 9 prisons of Bader that were teleported to this level of the abyss were also facing tremendous pressure. The Abyssal Demon Camp was a vanguard camp formed entirely by the petitioners who believed in the evil dragon goddess Tiamat and Batsu's characteristics. The commander of this camp was an Abyssal Red Dragon whose body had evolved far beyond its peers. As a devout mortal who had turned into a demon, the Abyssal Red Dragon was extremely fanatical about the Dragon Queen's will. The moment it was teleported to the Acid Fog Canyon, it began to build the Hellgate Fortress. The Abyssal Demons slaughtered the lowly demons in captivity in batches so that the remnants of Batsu's life in these guys' bodies could be used for the last bit of value. They carried out all the procedures of the Hellgate Fortress so strictly that even if the camp was besieged by a large number of demons, they would not skimp on even the slightest part of the process. The Abyssal Red Dragon had its own pride. This former chief priest of the Tiamat sect had a fanatical worship of the powerful 5-colored Megalosaurus. The Megalosaurus's natural scales, claws, and wings, all of them made it envious. After joining the 9 prisons of Bader and becoming an abyssal demon, it had been working extra hard to obtain all the opportunities to advance. Long-term efforts always paid off, and it finally succeeded in growing from a weak abyssal white dragon to a powerful abyssal red dragon. Claws, fangs, wings, scales, these body structures that it used to envy were harvested by it one by one. The current abyssal red dragon was even stronger than some of the Megalosaurus it used to worship. There was no doubt about this. As soon as it arrived at the Acid Fog Canyon, it was attacked by a group of cataclysmic worms, and the Tana Rita demon army controlled by this high-level acid fog demon also brought great danger to the camp. Facing this variable that might affect it from completing the Great Dragon Queen's will, the Abyssal Red Dragon, who had inherited the Red Dragon's violent temper, directly led its personal guards to execute a decapitation operation. When the last acid fogworm on the group of cataclysmic worms was ignited by the dragon's breath, the abyssal red dragon couldn't help but laugh. Dragon's breath. This was the ability it had always wanted to have. It could spit out flames that could burn everything like a real red dragon. Just like Keys before, this was also a kind of compensation for the airdrop plan that the evil Dragon King's Court and Bader's First Layer Strategic Defense Attack and Logistics Bureau had formulated. This ability was very good and very powerful. At this moment, the abyssal red dragon commander couldn't help but think about what kind of reward it would receive after successfully constructing the Hellgate Fortress. At the very least, I'll be rewarded with the same physical strength as a megalosaurus. That's right. Who are you? The abyssal red dragon stared in horror at the strange spellcaster who had unknowingly appeared behind it, and at the same time exposed its thoughts with a single sentence. I am a dragon's secondary body, Hemtar. Following the caster's words, the abyssal red dragon suddenly realized that the light in the sky had suddenly dimmed. The clouds that were originally refracting or reflecting the light of the numerous active volcanoes seemed to have lost their color. No, it's not that the sky has darkened, but the enormous worm's mouth suddenly closed below the abyssal red dragon and its personal guards, sucking in this group of stowaways from the Batsu. That was why the abyssal red dragon and the others felt that the sky had suddenly darkened. However, it was already too late when they reacted. Being sucked into the mouth of a demon lord like the Worm Tyrant, even a real red dragon would have a slim chance of survival, let alone these Batsid Devil who only had some characteristics of the Penishade dragons. Without even chewing, these snacks were sent into the Worm Tyrant's stomach pouch with astonishing digestive ability. In the distance, the camp that was building Hell's Gate in full swing was now being attacked by some giant floating acid mist worms that looked like blazing whales. These guys are the Firewalkers. Snade pointed at the giant floating acid mist worms on the magic sandbox and explained to Keys and the others. This is another advanced form of the acid mist worms. They are the highest level demons in the food chain of this acid mist canyon, second only to the Worm Tyrant. Even a Baylor would have to be careful to avoid these creatures when it comes to this level. In fact, I once obtained some body samples of this monster in an experiment, and the results of the analysis led me to an inference. This huge worm monster itself may be the Baylor flame demon that was parasitized by the acid mist worm and slowly turned into this monster. Snade opened his storage dimension and spat out the relevant analysis scroll. He cast a spell to summon a pair of invisible hands and passed it to Keys. My goodness, a Demolic actually has the talent to act as a sword swallower. Ricknaz, I think you should record down this obscure knowledge. Mechanical Golem number 21 saw this scene and secretly used an electronic voice to remind his noble goblin friend. Ignoring this strange mechanical golem's habitual jesting, the goblin Ricknaz's new invention, the Observer, had the effect of a radar array. It discovered these giant monsters when they appeared in the air near the fortress defensive perimeter. Such a large body and the way it floated in the air reminded Keys of a type of cosmic beast that the Purple Potato Fairy's mercenary army often raised in his previous life. Chapter 63. Mr. Keys Fenton is extremely talented in commanding battles. He is especially sensitive to controlling the battle situation, so he can always come up with a good plan to attack the opponent. However, an ordinary man could not take away his ambition. He had inherited the warlike nature of the Blue Dragon tribe. Of course, this is not derogatory. In fact, the scene of him personally entering the acid mist worm plain battlefield is unforgettable. Renaz's Bloody Battle Frontline Report, Arbus Volume, Chapter 13 inches the Battle of New York when the Avengers fought against the Chitauri army. Which heroes were the main forces that faced the Leviathan? Those who watched the movie knew that it was the Hulk and Thor. How did they deal with the giant beasts? The answer was, hammer it. Jump on the giant beast's back and hammer it. Jump on the giant beast's back and hammer it hard. Currently, The mercenary fortress in the Bartholomew Plain was facing a high-level acid mistworm demon that looked very much like a leviathan, the sky-burning walker. This was a high-level Tana Reet demon unique to the acid mist canyon plain. It was an extremely rare event. The acid mistworm would parasitize and devour an entire Baylor. Ordinary acid mistworms evolved into sky-burning walkers. As they continued to eat and grow, their bodies would grow bigger and bigger. Looking at the burning skywalkers hovering in the air like burning airships, Quest already knew what these demons were going to do next thanks to the information provided by Snade the Half-Lich. They were going to use their usual move, launching a collision attack from high up in the air with the help of gravity, then using explosive flames and other spell-like abilities to attack the opponent. The Demolic Snade had also warned Quest that this kind of demon's charge was extremely powerful. Even the giant bull demons, which were known for their physical strength in the abyss and could be seen as the demonic version of a moving fortress, could not directly face the sky-burning walker's collision attack. As for the fortress's defense system, the sky-burning walkers would only need one dive to pierce through the 3 layers of defense system that they had painstakingly built. Currently, through the scan of the Goblin Observer device, they had discovered that there were 5 sky-burning walkers that were about to arrive. In truth, there was no need for additional assistance. With the burning sky walker's massive body, it could be seen clearly even from a great distance away. It was true that Keys had greatly improved and upgraded the defenses of this otherworldly fortress, but the time it took to construct the fortress was still too short. Whether it was the cannons or the crossbows, the conventional long-range attacks the Fort Bader was equipped with were not enough to defend against the aerial attacks of the burning Skywalker. We can't let these guys launch an air attack. Keys quickly came to a decision. In order to ensure the success of his plan to open Hell's Gate Fortress, he had to personally take down the floating behemoths that could cause huge damage to the fortress's defense system. Of course, such a surprise attack was not the work of a lone wolf. Together with the commander of the fortress, 30 of the strongest elite bone demon hook soldiers arrived above the burning sky walker with advanced teleportation. They were responsible for dealing with the possible interference of the demon minions. To take down such a massive creature like the burning sky walker, the adamantine side sword that the ogre blacksmith Neru had forged for Keys was a little small. At this moment, the weapon in Keys' hand was replaced by the personal collection of the camp's chained demon acting commander. It was a giant horse-slaying sword that was 3 meters long and 1.5 feet thick. It was made with Bartobi as the raw material. It was part of the reward that the former commander had to pay for summoning the fire giant mercenaries. Fortunately, the bloodline of the Megalosaurus gave Keys extraordinary strength. After casting a slight enlargement on himself, he was able to wield the sword and fight. Before launching the surprise attack, the Blue Dragon Boy did not forget to ask the spellcasters to coat the sword with a layer of silver and add as many sharpness spells to it as possible. This enhanced weapon was indeed very useful. Keys, who had flashed out of the teleportation spell, stabbed it into the tough flesh of the burning sky walker's head without much effort. Like a table knife cutting through meat, the flames on the burning sky walker could not cause any trouble to Keys. He dragged the giant sword that was deeply embedded in the burning sky walker's back and galloped forward. The sharp blade, enhanced by the sharpness spell, easily cut through the flesh, and the silver coating on the sword made the wound of the giant tower demon unable to heal at all. The burning sky walker, who bore the brunt of Keys' attack, was greatly injured in the first exchange. It was so painful that it almost twisted into a fried dough twist in the air. However, it was an advanced tower demon that was born from the body of a Baylor. Although it was huge in size, it was not stupid. The abyssal fire that it inherited from its former host burst out of the wound. It wanted to heal the huge wound by burning the flesh. At the same time, it also used an ability that it stole from the Baylor's perfect summoning tower demon. Dozens of sarcomas of various sizes appeared on the surface of its body. Hidden within the sarcomas were large groups of tower demons that had responded to the summons. They were all endowed with abyssal fire armor by the burning sky walker's flesh. Vroks, Bugalas, and Hezroars broke out of their cocoons one after another. They were not immune to fire like the Baylor, and the abyssal fire armor would also cause damage to them. However, this also stimulated their ferocious nature. These demons seemed to have gone berserk and pounced on the enemies closest to them as soon as they appeared. These small fries were naturally dealt with by the elite bone demon scythes that launched the surprise attack together with the fortress commander. For a moment, ice walls and abyssal fire filled the burning sky walker's body. I still need a strong dose of medicine. Keys, who had fused with the blood essence of the ancient golden dragon, not only had his control of magic improved by a lot, but his blue dragon's ability to control electromagnetism had also reached a new level. The super electromagnetic gun, which originally needed time to charge up, could now be fired instantly. The pure silver cannonball, which was the size of a basketball, was fired at a speed dozens of times faster than the speed of sound. It directly bombarded the burning sky walker's head. The cannonball, which carried a huge amount of kinetic energy, was heavily embedded in the victim's brain. Then, there was no then. After receiving such a serious injury, no matter how strong one's body was, it was enough to kill them. The burning sky walker was only a relatively powerful tower demon, not an immortal life form with divinity. The giant beast's vital organs were severely damaged and died. Just like Zeppelin's Hindenburg airship, its body exploded and fell almost vertically to the ground. As for the other tower demons that were attached to its body, if they were unlucky and did not have the ability to fly, they could only fall from the sky together with the giant beast's corpse. If they happened to have the ability to fly, they would be even more unlucky because they would be attacked by the elite bone demons. Before the tower demons fell to their deaths, they would be torn to pieces by the bone demons in the air with their scythes. Chapter 64. In all fairness, demons and demons didn't fight to the death whenever they met. In some neutral lands like Sigil City, these two races could even sit down together and conspire over ale while sipping on evil deeds. It was just that when it came to the blood war, these two races wouldn't care about victory or defeat. They only cared about their standpoint. To demons, all devils and their supporters on the blood battlefield were mortal enemies that they would not rest until one of them was dead. As the saying went, the hunter will shoot the bird that sticks out, and the blade will chop off the snake in the ground. After becoming peerless on the blood war, one would have to face the fate of being focus fire. After taking down a firewalker, Keth didn't even have the time to feel the joy of victory before more Thanner Reed demons swarmed toward him in a frenzy. Even the demons who couldn't fly had to make useless attempts to leap up. The other four Skywalkers also reacted quickly after seeing one of their kind being shot down. As expected of a newborn demon born after devouring a Baylor, these airship-like behemoths are indeed quite intelligent. Watching as the Firewalker lured Quess into the attack range of the Thanner Reed demons while casting all sorts of spells to prevent teleportation to limit his ambush, Quess couldn't help but raise the threat level of the Firewalker even higher. He didn't have the bad habit of being headstrong. After calmly analyzing the situation, the Blue Dragon youth decisively ordered the bone demons around him to teleport back to the camp and mobilize artillery support. He, on the other hand, took out the railgun ammunition he had prepared beforehand from his spatial belt. Although silver could deal additional damage to lower world creatures, its relatively soft texture would still affect its lethality. Therefore, this batch of specially prepared ammunition had a hollow structure. The interior was filled with silver powder, and the bullet head was plated with silver. Quest named it silver-containing armor-piercing bullets. This batch of ammunition consumed a third of Keyes' silver reserves, twice the cost of killing the Calamity Apostle with the silver bullet offensive. There was nothing that couldn't be done with money. If it didn't work, he would just spend twice the amount. Railgun fire. Relying on the improvement of his innate ability and the enhancement of his electromagnetic manipulation ability, Keyes' large-scale destructive spell was quickly formed. The cannonballs fired from the electric field constructed by the Blue Dragon youth instantly formed a huge barrage of death above the demon army. Vroks, Buglaws, Hezru, Bloodlions, Iron-Armored, Glabrizu, and Plant Spawn. All sorts of demons, whether known by their names or not, were torn apart by the silver-containing armor-piercing bullets and crushed into dust. Only the stronger Glabrizu and Soul Judgment Rubik's Cube managed to escape with their lives, ending up as Old Scent. However, due to the silver-containing armor-piercing bullets breaking, silver powder splattered everywhere, forming a silver mist that caused the Tana demons great pain. The wounds that were originally not fatal became unable to heal. Even if they held their breath, their skin would still absorb the silver powder and cause severe pain all over their body. This was far more serious than the damage caused by some ordinary silver-plated weapons. The powdery silver mist not only increased the contact area with the demons, but the considerate keys also added another gift pack to it, the Honda Holy Oil, an extract of the wings of heavenly creatures from the heavenly mountain plain of the 7 hills of heaven in the lawful good faction. This thing was much more valuable than silver in the lower world. Although the Honda Holy Oil could also cause harm to demons, it was designated as one of the necessary offerings in the promotion ceremony of some species of Batsa Devil, thus increasing its value. Keys had only bought about a few kilograms of it from the Chamber of Commerce of Yugro's Judgment Demons, but the cost of the Soul Prism was 3 times more than that of the silver bricks. However, you get what you pay for. After the silver powder soaked in the Honda Holy Oil exploded into a silver mist, the damage to the Tana demons was also doubled. Even the powerful demons hiding in the demon army, ready to launch a sneak attack, were forced to reveal their true forms by the silver mist. The commander of this demon army, including the 5 Burning Sky Walkers, was a gigantic skull demon. Because he was forced to cast a rapid recovery spell to heal his injuries, he had to remove his original high-level invisibility spell. Around his huge, bloated body floating in the air, the foul gas spreading around was contaminated by the silver mist, causing continuous minor explosions. The gigantic skull demon did not have any obvious body structure, but there was a deformed face as big as a carriage on the front of its body that looked like a naked brain. What should be its ears were replaced by a pair of shrunken arms, and at the end of the palms were tiny fingers. 4 iron chains with sharp nails were connected to the twisted folds and pipes under its body, and it was tied to a few nearby Hezru that it controlled as mounts. The gigantic skull demon was not a species of Tana demons. They belonged to the more ancient Obilus demons and were one of the former masters of the Tana demons. However, the glory of the past had dissipated with the failure of the war between good and evil that swept across the multiverse blindly launched after the chaos. The rise of the Tana demons replaced the former masters who had lost their power, and the Obilus demon lords chose to hibernate deeper in the abyss. In that great war, the gigantic skull demons were recruited to strengthen the army after the chaos because they had the ability to transplant the flesh of abyssal creatures. These smart Obilus demons did not directly participate in the war, and they survived almost unscathed. Now, they served the Tana demon lords in the same way as they served the ancient Obilus demon lords, as advisors and flesh craftsmen. Long was such a gigantic skull demon. His previous allegiance was to the Baylor Tardheim, who once ruled the entire Acid Fog Canyon. He also participated in the experiment to create the Worm Tyrant because of his specialty. However, when the Worm Tyrant, the experimental product of the former Demon Lord, swallowed the Baylor Lord and replaced it, Long's allegiance also changed to the new Demon Lord. It had to be said that even if there was a change of dynasty, they would not starve to death and rely on their skills to survive. The gigantic skull demons were even more important under the Worm Tyrant. In particular, after helping the Helman Tyrant use the Baylor demon guards left behind by the previous Demon Lord to create the most powerful acid mist Helmanth demon, the Burning Sky Walker, Long was directly appointed by the Demon Lord as a general in charge of training and managing these newborn demons. The opportunity to bully and oppress the powerful Tana demons was something that every gigantic skull demon could only come across by chance. Long liked to obey such orders very much. Unfortunately, the good time of being in the limelight only lasted for a few years. A wolf-snake demon who applied for the position of demon warlord under the worm tyrant and succeeded in ending Long's good days. Every time he thought of this, gigantic skull demon Long would gnash his teeth in anger. If it weren't for the fact that he was really not that guy's opponent, whether it was fighting or playing tricks, the wolf-snake demon was much better than the gigantic skull demon. Therefore, although Long was resentful of the act of usurping the power of the demon lord and directly giving him orders, he still had to be obedient. That damned wolf-snake demon, even the brutal tyrant worm monarch, is much more approachable compared to it. He said to make the best use of everything. Don't let me have the chance otherwise. The resentment in the gigantic skull demon Long's heart did not affect his countermeasure to Keys's attack. This demon that looked like a naked deformed brain had a much higher degree of concentration than the Tana Reet demons. In fact, the slightly stronger gigantic skull demons were immune to mental spells or psionic effects. Even if they were distracted by external objects, they could still handle what they needed to do. This ability benefited from the gigantic skull demon's talent and the survival method of being immersed in bewitching and controlling other creatures. To some extent, after the wolf-snake demon warlord assisted the worm tyrant to create the burning sky walker, he let the gigantic skull demon lead the army to war for its extremely clever mind and bewitching and controlling talent. This kind of work that the gigantic skull demon regarded as rough work was indeed making the best use of everything. Although it couldn't guarantee that the demon legion would be invincible, at least the commander who led the army to war could restrain the chaotic nature of the Tanaree demons. When facing the old enemy of the 9 prisons of Bader, he could judge the situation and bring more trouble to the opponent. What a troublesome enemy! The gigantic skull demon Long's counterattack came very quickly. As soon as he healed his body, the demon commander released one of his spell-like abilities, Group Monster Immobilization Spell. Except for Keys, who was easily immune, 1/3 of the Bone Demon squad that followed him to snipe the Burning Sky Walker failed to resist the spell. They fell into a state of being immobilized and fell directly into the demon army from mid-air. Their fate was obvious, so there was no need to elaborate. The gigantic skull demon, who was forced to remove its invisibility state, took the opportunity to control the Hezra mount that was anchored by the animated chain that extended out of its body. It dragged the gigantic skull demon to a burning sky walker that had lowered its flying altitude and hovered above the demon army. Thus, it escaped the range of the silver fog created by Keys's silver bullet attack. Attack! You scum! The worm tyrant will devour anyone who tries to escape. This guy's soul language ability was very powerful. It was like a pay-to-win player opening a public channel, instantly covering the entire battlefield. Even Keys and the Bone Demons could hear the threatening words roaring out in the abyss language deep in their hearts. Chapter 65. In addition to coercion, the giant skull's control technique also included the option of enticement. The giant skull liked to collect obscure artworks and other valuable items that could decorate their nests. They had a special liking for enchanted magic items. They often carried these things with them, not for their own use, because there were very few magic items suitable for their blasphemous and ugly bodies, but as a reward for their loyal servants. In this way, they were more like pay-to-win players, and that was the truth. The giant skull, Langer, used his deformed arm to take out a large number of rings, amulets, and other equipment with flying spells from the gullies that covered his body. He rewarded these equipment to the demons who survived Keys's silver bullet offensive for free. After the bombardment of silver bullets and the invasion of silver mist, they could still maintain their combat effectiveness. This in itself symbolized that these demons were not small fries, and each of them had decent strength. But the giant skull was also a demon, wasn't it? His generosity was based on the premise that these equipment had a small back door. In addition to the effect that allowed the wearer to walk in the air, Langer's gift also had a hidden instruction spell, with the spell resonance characteristic. The more demons wearing these equipment at the same time, the easier it was for the giant skull commander to influence the wearer's thoughts. Sensing that the ruby control core embedded in his mouth was gradually smoothing out the magical ripples, the troll commander's turbid eyes that were the size of a car's tire flashed. He issued his first order to the powerful demons that were under his control. All rise to the sky. Snipe the enemy who shot down the sky walker with all your strength. Tear him apart. Chew him up. Eat him alive. The giant skull, Langer's language was chaotic, but the goal was very clear. As if they had a shared vision, all the demons turned their eyes to Keys and then rushed to this fixed target without thinking. No retreat. Use Ice Wall to divide the battlefield. Also, where's the bone demon that called for artillery support? Why haven't I seen Hellscream hit the heads of these demons? Keys obviously didn't recharge, so he could only rely on the method of roaring to solve the communication problem. As the command in Inferno reached the ears of the Bone Devils, the elite Batsu Scythe soldiers quickly responded. Faced with the demons of various main towers rising into the air, the Bone Demons calmly used their spell-like abilities to summon thick ice walls out of thin air to ensure that the commander of the fortress, who was the main attacker, would not be surrounded and only had to face attacks from a limited number of directions. These intermediate demons gathered together and did their best to clear out groups of enemies in 2s and 3s. They didn't show any signs of panic or even panic when their companions died from time to time. In fact, no matter how cowardly a demon was, as long as he joined the bloody battle, he would automatically be blessed with fanaticism and fight to the death. These were mental states that the Batsu people, who were known for their cunning, rarely maintained. Not to mention that Keys, as the commander of the fortress, also held the true names of all the bone demons. For the lower world creatures of the Order faction, this was an authority more terrifying than death. They could fearlessly carry out missions against the demons under the command of the fortress commander. However, none of the Bone Devils could answer Keys' question of artillery support for the time being. The reinforcements should have arrived long ago, but the current situation seemed to be a problem with the defensive system of the fortress itself. In the defensive position of the mercenary fortress from another plane, an uninvited guest had arrived amidst the guards who were on standby. Broom Brows looked at the man who had suddenly appeared in front of him. He felt that this man was very similar to the werewolf that his old acquaintance, Mad Dog, had turned into. The only difference was that he was much bigger. This uninvited guest was about 12 feet tall when he stood up. He was holding a giant axe that was engraved with mysterious symbols and had a ruby embedded at the end. Unlike the werewolves, he had no hair on his body. His skin was the color of blood. He wasn't wearing any armor. Instead, he was wearing a mystic wristband with complicated patterns on his forearm. His claw-like hand tightly gripped the long handle of the axe. His face, which resembled a hyena's, was especially ferocious. His saliva-covered teeth seemed to be chewing on something. There was also a twisted snake head sticking out from the side of this man's neck. It coiled dangerously and made a disturbing hissing sound. This was the new wolf snake demon warlord that Giant Skull Devil Langu had a lot of resentment towards. In the plane of Acid Fog Canyon, it served the tyrant worm. In fact, in the entire abyss, only the demon lord was qualified to command this kind of demon. Their footprints were all over the abyss, but this didn't mean that there were many of them. Generally speaking, there would only be one wolf snake demon on each level of the abyss. The rarer something was, the more valuable it was. Although wolf snake demons were few in number, they were extremely powerful. Even the Balers, who were slightly stronger than them, had a trace of respect for these demons. If it wasn't for the fact that it was a matter of life and death, the Balers would feel powerless against the wolf snake demon's innate super regeneration ability. The wolf snake demon was also very dangerous to the Balers because it could ignore most of the damage taken by the supernatural axe and was immune to ordinary poisons. Wolf snake demons often served powerful demon lords as law enforcers. It was also a common choice to supervise the demon army. they would not hesitate to carry out the demon lord's mission. At the same time, they would deliberately get rid of demons that were too presumptuous, as they didn't trust anyone else and usually had a disdainful attitude towards the abilities of other demons. Wolf-snake demons were used to solving some key problems by themselves despite having a high position and power in the abyss. For example, after many Batsa camps were airdropped into the plain of Acid Fog Canyon, this newly appointed wolf-snake demon warlord even personally led a small team of trusted subordinates to carry out a hunting operation in addition to assisting the tyrant worm in properly deploying the demon army to encircle and annihilate them. This series of actions that involved everything personally could be called a model worker in Tannery. And this wolf-snake demon warlord's first hunting target was the foreign plain mercenary fortress that giant skull devil Langu was supposed to deal with according to the plan. There were once scholars who studied demonology who discussed the origins of wolf-snake demons. They believed that these Tannery demons with the heads of hyenas and venomous snakes were very likely the creations of the ancient species of Obilus, like the giant skull devil. The wolf-snake demons did not refute this point of view. However, a wolf-snake demon bounty hunter wandering outside the bottomless abyss had conveniently visited these scholars and their disciples while he was on a mission and borrowed their precious lives. The wolf-snake demons looked down on the giant skull devil. They generally believed that the giant skull devil liked to play tricks and habitually avoid war. This could be seen as evidence of the cowardice and ignorance of this race. Thus, even though Langu was arranged to be the commander of the attack on Key's fortress, the wolf-snake demon warlord was the first to personally visit the battlefield commanded by the giant skull devil. The wolf-snake demon had the eyes of constant knowledge. It easily saw the giant skull devil hiding in the layers of protection of the demon army using a high-level invisibility spell. It witnessed the whole process of Keys leading the bone demons to shoot down a burning sky walker and used a kind of evocation spell that it had never seen before to bombard the demon army. "He's just a piece of trash," the wolf-snake demon commented to the giant skull devil Langu while rubbing its chin with the soul-sucking ruby inlaid on the long handle of its giant axe to relieve the itch. It's clearly decided to take down this fortress, but it actually wasted its strength to encircle and annihilate a young dragon who just looks a little strange. Ignorant guy. The wolf-snake demon saw through Keys's real human form, but the effect of constant knowledge could not see its excessive size and other unusual places. It could only see that it was a blue dragon in the stage of a young dragon. The blue dragon was originally more proficient in spellcasting, so it could use a stronger evocation spell that it had never seen before. Although the wolf-snake demon was surprised, it was not difficult to deal with. It should be known that the most direct manifestation of a dragon's strength was its size. For example, Congudius, Targaryen, and other famous true dragons in the multiverse who were so powerful that they could even anger the gods rarely transformed into a human form that restricted their strength. Although there was no lack of valiant dragons who were used to transforming into human form to fight, those guys were at least at the stage of an old dragon or above. Therefore, the wolf-snake demon believed that the enemy in front of it, who was obviously a young blue dragon in human form, was not enough to subvert the demon's established goal. The operation of the giant skull devil was undoubtedly from the perspective of its own safety. It wanted to solve the hidden danger that the young blue dragon posed to its own safety. This was really a cowardly and short-sighted behavior. When I go back, I'll find a chance to chop off this guy's head. I hope your bloated brain is strong enough. The wolf-snake demon stroked the edge of the giant axe and thought to itself, not to mention the life plan that the demon warlord had silently set for the giant skull devil. The defenders in the mercenary fortress from the foreign plain all became extremely cautious when they saw the underworld creature that suddenly appeared in front of them from its invisible state. Be careful. This is a wolf-snake demon, an extremely advanced Tanna. There was no lack of knowledgeable people among the defenders. A spellcaster from material plane recognized the wolf-snake demon by its unique appearance. However, Just as he was about to use a spell to amplify his voice to warn others, he was stopped by a poisonous thorn that pierced his jaw and went deep into his brain. At the same time, more than a dozen assassinations of the same style appeared one after another among the defenders. How could the wolf-snake demon take the risk alone? This demon that had the habit of commanding other Tana, would bring along personal guards that matched its status every time it went out. The assassination that just happened was the work of the Babu demons under its command. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.